Hello and welcome to the 2 minute drill final mock draft. We got 3 rounds for you. We have 8 different users, all the 8 scouts that you've seen on the reports this draft cycle. We still have a few more reports coming out. We weren't as perfect this year in terms of scheduling everything. So maybe even up until draft day, we'll have some more reports coming to you. But for this 3 round mock draft, we are very excited. All 8 of us are going to be taking 4 teams apiece. And hopefully, in the comments, you can let us know how terrible we did. All right. Well, with the very first pick, Bailey Kumar on the clock for the Tennessee Titans. He's ready to shake things up. He's not going chalk. Bailey, what are you doing here with the number one overall selection?
Yeah, we're going pretty crazy with the first overall pick. I think I might be the first one to think of this one, but I'm going Cam Ward, QB from Miami. This has been a telegraph pick for weeks now. I don't think there's anything original or new that can be really said about this. Just please let this guy be good. I've suffered so much as a Titans fan. Please, I deserve this.
Yeah, Cam Ward's a fun player. He is definitely someone that I think could cause some headaches early just because he is so used to playing that hero style ball. But he has just such natural touch when he plays in that style to where I'm really excited for what he can do. There's enough proof of what he can do in pocket to where I think it's reasonable to expect that he can translate over to the NFL, that he can make plays in structure, and that he can continue to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. Probably probably a little bit overrated, just in terms of just like everyone hyping up like, oh, he's now going to be the number one pick, so now he's just automatically amazing, and he compares to all these like legendary quarterbacks. I think he's probably going to be someone that we're talking about more in that like 8 to 12 range of quarterbacks, but I still think that type of quarterback is worth it if you can build a successful team around them, and I think the Titans can do that.
Yeah, Ward is if you compare it to like last year's draft, obviously Caleb Williams is higher than him. Jane Daniels is probably higher than him, and a lot of people probably have Drake May higher than him. I'd probably have him similar tier as Drake May in terms of how good this quarterback is. So definitely somebody that like deserves to go number one overall, but not a generational QB1 prospect that we kind of seen in recent years where you're just like, this is just a slam dunk pick. It's so easy. This guy's going to be stud. He does have a lot of work to do, but you can't teach that arm, and his kind of comfortableness in the pocket and his ability to create out of structure is just so amazing. And his accuracy and touch is really nice. So yeah, there's some stuff to clean up, but definitely a lot of promising traits.
Yeah, and moving forward to day two, you only had one other selection for the Titans, but you were able to make it a good one. You got Luther Burden with the 35th overall pick, wide receiver out of Missouri, a guy that many thought was going to be like a top 10 pick in the preseason. Not as productive this year, but still a very talented wideout. Give your thoughts on Burden and what type of impact he could have with Ward entering for the Titans.
Yeah, Burton was a guy who had a great 2023 season, and looking to take the next step forward, he looked so good. And then 2024, bad QB play just caused him to drop. And it's honestly pretty shocking that this is like it's a much more of like a kind of a media take where I got or yeah, media kind of casual NFL fan take where a guy has a bad season, so you drop him on your board. And well, NFL teams will be like, well, we saw what this guy can do in 2023, and we're pretty sold on it. But for Burden, looks like they're just going off the 2024 stuff. Burden, I think, is a slot receiver. He's kind of one of those typical um, vertical slot guys where you want him on the go routes, on the vertical routes, where I think he is better than a lot of the kind of players that we see in the archetype. And, also on the screens and the short yard stuff, his explosiveness and the yards after catch is certainly very tantalizing for a Titans team that is in desperate need of wide receiver help. Calvin Ridley, a bit of a risky signing for them last offseason, but it worked out well for him. Ridley had a really good year. And besides that, it's not a lot of great stuff. You have Van Jefferson as a free agent signing and Traylon Burks for the 3 games a year he can stay healthy. So definitely a huge need. Potential trade back spot, but Burden, I think, is too good of a wide receiver to really trade back and risk it.
Yeah, I mean, Traylon Burks one of the best wide receivers in the NFL per Cam Ward, but
Top
uh,
four.
adding Burden in is very exciting. He still had the most missed tackles forced out of wideouts in college football this past season, so he's a very talented player. And I think even with the down year from a number standpoint, he still showed a lot of great traits on tape. So I'm excited for what he can do. And if he gets to 35, I think that's a great pick. You remain on the board though with the Cleveland Browns with the second overall pick. We really let you hog the top of the draft. This is another pick that I think somewhat chalky. So why don't you go ahead and talk us through it?
Just like my profiles, I demand to do the best players. So here we are again. So for the number two pick, this is actually pretty interesting to me. So I thought Abdul Carter was going to be the pick here for a very very long time, and then suddenly it's just Travis Hunter, um, number two here to the Cleveland Browns, who has selected wide receiver and corner as he's demanded to be announced by. And I I kind of like Abdul Carter more for the Browns, honestly, in terms of the fit, but. Travis Hunter seems to be more like the NFL team. Seems like they have him slightly above here, probably without the injury risk of that foot is what dropped Carter down to not being the consensus number one non QB on the board. And Hunter's just such a special prospect. It's just everything he does is so amazing. And he even as like a pure wide receiver, you can probably just take him here and you'd be okay with it. And then when you add in the corner ability, this guy is going to be one of the most interesting players I think we're going to see develop over the years.
Yeah, I did my profile on him, and I considered doing a profile for him as a receiver and as a cornerback. Obviously, I cut corners though, so I just did it all in one. But very talented player and someone that I think is going to be impactful on both sides of the football. Very nice natural instincts, both as a cornerback and receiver, to where he's consistently making big time plays. He's someone that was completely ignored almost at times during his time at cornerback, but even still, he put together pretty good ball production numbers to where it's evident that the ball skills are there. And then as a receiver, anytime Shador Sanders needed someone to target, he was going towards Travis Hunter. It was just consistently looking his direction to try to find the stars. And there were a lot of great wideouts in that Colorado receivers room, but Travis Hunter was just far and away the best. And I think he is pretty clearly established as one of the best wideouts in this class. And I think he's going to continue that success in the NFL. And pairing up with Jerry Jeudy, I think there's a lot of fun for whoever gets the quarterback for that team. And, looking at the day two picks, you continue to bolster up this offense. At pick 33, you have Amarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. And at pick 76 in the third round, you have the Cleveland Browns taking Tyler Shuck, quarterback out of Louisville, a guy we've heard as potential first rounder. That's what the rumors are saying. We'll see. Walk us through these selections and what you think this Cleveland Browns team can look like with such a young key pieces of the offense.
Yeah, and we also got Braden Swinson at 94 for the Browns. So with Hampton, he's someone who I think I, I'm pretty comfortable saying he's a lock for the first round at this point. He seems like just way too good of a running back prospect to really let him slip. There's a ton of landing spots for him. Um, the Cowboys can look at him. The Broncos could look at him. Even the Steelers could maybe even look at somebody like him. Actually, not the Steelers, sorry. But I mean, he's probably just too good to escape out of the first round. So if you're the Browns and you just add a dynamic playmaker like Hunter, you do the next best thing after that is add another dynamic playmaker like Amarian Hampton, who after moving on from Nick Chubb, the Browns are kind of looking for another running back. Jerome Ford had a good year, but Hampton is probably that special of a prospect where you just kind of issue him and relegate him back to the backup role where he's played for a couple of years and let Hampton take over the backfield or even run a split backfield. And then Tyler Shuck, the QB, obviously is going to be the main talking point here. The NFL is really high on this guy. This is a predictive mock, so maybe we should have had him go a little bit higher, but he's an older prospect. Browns fans are used to older QBs, and the NFL teams love his arm. And when you watch him play, he makes some insane throws. I don't disagree with what they're saying, but it's just such a long like development path for him. He just so old, but at pick 76, he might as well take a shot. Maybe he develops into something good when you get him to the NFL camp. He's just so experienced and so advanced that you feel comfortable starting him in 2026. And if it doesn't work out, you still set yourself up well to take a QB in the 2026 class and have Sheck relegated to backup role. And then with Swinson, that's just a BPA pick. The Browns' edge depth isn't that great, and Swinson, I think, is one of the better edge prospects on the board.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if Shuck is the pick at like 33, honestly, for Cleveland. I think the vibe is there for me where I think Shuck just makes a lot of sense for what Stefanski likes to do with his quarterbacks. Maybe they trade back from 33 and they get him in like the 40s or something for a team kind of moving up if a guy like Burden or Book is there, like it played out in this draft. There's a lot of options. But overall, I think Shuck makes a lot of sense for Stefanski and this offensive scheme. Hampton's another good pick. Obviously, Chubb is gone, so the running back room is pretty vacant. They need to get someone in that backfield, especially assuming that they're going to have a rookie quarterback under center as well, even if Flacco or Pickett's a starter week one, I think the rookie's going to be thrust into that starting job pretty quickly after. So there's definitely going to need a running back presence in that backfield, whether that's signing J.K. Dobbins, signing back Nick Chubb, or getting one of these very talented rookies. There's a lot of options on the board, but if the draft plays out where they can get Hunter with their first pick, Hampton with their second, and Chuck with their third, I really don't hate it. I think in terms of just mock draft grading, this is probably one of the better drafts of just like getting impact players. And you can have your concerns about like if Shuck's actually going to be a good quarterback in the NFL, stuff like that. But like you can't hate on the value of these picks. And I think each and every one is pretty easy to sell fans on because I think the value is definitely there with each selection. With the third overall pick, the New York Giants are on the board, and we have Jack Donovan here, a guy that you guys have seen on many profiles. And Jack with the third pick, it seemed to be coming. It seems to be pretty chalk at this point. But what do you have the New York Giants doing here?
Yeah, so I have him taking Abdul Carter here. I think it's an interesting spot. There's been some rumors of them shopping the pick around the last day or two. I don't really buy it. I think it's an interesting spot with them having Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns already there on the edge. But just kind of with how this board is, I think it makes sense to just sit tight at three and take the best player overall. If they get some sort of crazy offer similar to what the Cardinals got for Will Anderson back in 2023, I think you have to consider it. But I think there's a bit of a drop off after Carter, and I imagine the Giants will see it similarly. And because of that, I think they take Carter here. Burns is obviously locked up for a while, but Thibodeau's only got a year or two left, and I don't think he's necessarily a guy you're 100% certain you're going to be paying, the 15 or 20 million a year he might be demanding. So I think you just go ahead, you take your best player. Carter's a guy you can kind of move around a little bit too. He's got some experience off ball. So I think you can get creative sort of getting all these guys after the quarterback. So I think this is a guy you just kind of you take and you figure it out later. And I think it's an easy pick as one you feel good about. Obviously the other big question mark is, how they feel about Shedeur Sanders or, another quarterback. Um, for me, I'm just not quite there with those guys. I think there's too many question marks to really merit a top three pick. But as you might see later on, there might be a guy that could be worth taking for them.
Yeah, there was a point in this draft cycle very early on where Abdul Carter was talked about as a potential number one pick, when Titans maybe seemed like they weren't going to be taking the quarterback. And I think to get him here at three, even though guys like Hunter and Cam Ward are definitely exciting pieces that maybe fit a need a little bit more for the Giants, still getting a talent of this level at number three is very exciting for them. And yeah, like you said, you can kind of move Carter around to where maybe Thibodeau isn't immediately distraught by the selection and, demanding a trade or anything. You can make him believe that you're just gonna have Carter rotating in more versus letting Thibodeau and Burns kind of operate on the edges. There's a lot of things that they could do, and maybe they do end up trading Thibodeau. But overall, I think the talent of a guy like Abdul Carter compared to the rest of the class, positionally and just overall impact wise, is worth making the selection here in the top three.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an interesting one because I do think Carter's a little bit maybe more raw as a pass rusher than people are kind of letting on just because it's his first year playing a position. But I mean, you've got a guy who's really got the potential to be a game wrecker, and that's not something you can really pass up on, I don't think, in this spot.
Yeah, when you compare Carter to kind of the previous, I don't know, top edge rushers I've gone off the board, I think he is kind of in that lower tier. He does also have that foot injury that might be a problem long term, but the Giants are lucky and unlucky at the same time, picking at three here. You think, ideally, in most drafts, you can pick up a QB that they desperately need, but I mean, the draft just didn't work out this way with the QBs, with there only being one and him going first overall. But I do think they're kind of lucky here to be a three to still get one of the other two blue chippers at the premium position that you need. You kind of feel happy taking away from this draft, getting a guy like Carter who can be a cornerstone at that edge position. Moving on to the day two selections, the Giants pick up Jalen Milroe at pick 34, QB from Alabama. They then go to round three where they select Shamar Turner, a defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, and finally Marcus Bowe, offensive lineman for Purdue. Jack, you want to talk us through those picks?
Yeah, I think Milrow is going to be the probably most intriguing one here. I think the Giants are an interesting spot with quarterback where, at three, like I mentioned, it's maybe not something worth, taking the swing on there. But I like what they have in place for a quarterback, honestly. The offensive line was improved last year. with additions like Jermaine Illuminor. And, you've got Malik Neighbors there as your receiver one now. You've got a weapon you can lean on. Darius Slayton's back. There's a guy who can stretch the field for you. I think you bring in Milroe. You've got a coach in Brian Dable who's got experience developing these kind of more raw, physically gifted quarterbacks. And I really trust him to kind of maximize Jalen Milroe as a rusher while still, bringing him along as a passer in a good way, similar to how we did with Josh Allen. And Milroe being a guy who's really, really good at the deep ball. I think having Darius Slayton and maybe Jalen Hyde, if he can take that step, being there to kind of take the top off the defense, will really open things up for him as a passer. And then you have Malik Neighbors, who's going to be open a lot, and you're kind of your safety blanket. So I do like them to grab Milroe here, and I trust them to develop him. I think it's tricky, kind of looking at Dable's job security. If you don't think he's going to last beyond this year, then maybe this is not a pick you want to make. But if you trust him to develop your guy, then I think this is a really good landing spot for Milroe and a really good opportunity for the Giants to really get a difference maker at the quarterback position.
Yeah, he's a fun
Yeah.
player, and I think in terms of fit, Dable has that experience and has that kind of timeline that you want to line up with your young quarterbacks. Where I think you can set them up pretty well. I think it's undoubtable that there's a few landing spots that maybe Milroe works out in. People talk about the Rams, the Browns, but I think the Giants is the best one, just because there is that pathway, there is that experience and familiarity that Dable has in what he's done before, to where I think there's a path to where Milroe can work out. I know there's a lot of people that are just already gung ho that Milroe is just not going to work out because he was so all over the place at Alabama. But man, the athletic upside, the ability to win, just in terms of natural tools and traits, there's a lot to like and a lot to buy into. And it wouldn't shock me if this is a pick where maybe he gets taken at 34 and we look back on it a few years later and it's like, man, how did the league let this happen?
Yeah, I think also them having Russell Wilson in place and not really needing him to start immediately is going to be something that'll be nice for his development, and kind of having a more patient approach with him, I think is what a lot of people are advocating for. And a spot like the Giants, they'll be able to do that. Moving on to the other picks in the third round, Shamar Turner, he's an athletic defensive lineman. I think he really fits well next to Dexter Lawrence. He's a guy who can kind of cause some havoc rushing the passer, while not needing to take on the double teams as much because Dexter Lawrence obviously does it at a high level. You've got a lot of edge rushers around him too. So this is a guy you're really going to just throw in there. He's going to be a little raw at first, I think. He's kind of more of an athlete than a polished player right now. But with the guys that are around him, I think that's going to be okay off rip. And I think that, having him be surrounded by so much talent is going to let him kind of continue to develop the technique aspect of his game. And I think he just fits really well next to Lawrence. I think that's the kind of guy you want next to, that kind of mountain of a defensive tackle that Lawrence is. And then for Bo, I think the offensive line is better, like I mentioned, but they just need to continue to add talent there and continue to add depth there. Because a couple of injuries, like we saw last year with Andrew Thomas going out, and things get a little bit ugly. And if you're bringing a guy in like Milroe and a guy like Russell Wilson who takes a lot of sacks, I think the better the line is, the better you are. I think there's an argument to be made where you could take a running back somewhere here, but I just thought that Bo was kind of the best player available. I thought he slipped a little bit more than I might have expected him to. He's kind of a guy I see going in like the 60 to 75 range. So getting him here at 99 feels like a very good value at the end of the third round.
Well, there you have it. That is the Giants draft. Let us know in the comments what you think of Jack Donovan's work here. And, find him on Twitter, find him on Instagram, send him some hate messages if you aren't happy because, I think he did well, but, who knows?
Yeah, we'll
We'll see
see.
you later, Jack.
Yep. Thank you.
With the fourth pick, I am on the clock, and I am going with Will Campbell for the New England Patriots. Probably not the pick that I would make, but I think the smoke is just too strong to where it would be ridiculous to go in another direction. It would just be denial. Will Campbell is someone that I think has a lot of intriguing traits. He's a very good puller. He has some very nice play strength. He's been a 3-year starter at LSU in the SEC and really put together some very nice tape in that time. There are some questions in terms of just overall stiffness in his dropbacks as a pass protector. There is some questions about the overall wingspan and arm length that he offers as a left tackle and if that will hold up on the corner. I don't really question the arm length as much, but I do have some questions about the overall stiffness and his upright stance pass protection. But I don't know. I think for the Patriots, it makes sense. If you value Campbell, like a lot of NFL insiders are saying, like, these scouts, these GMs, these head coaches all think he's a top 16 starter from day one at left tackle. It makes sense for the Patriots to be all in on him because you need to bolster up the offensive line. You need to get Drake May protection. You know that he's shown some flashes of being a franchise quarterback, but you can't waste that time by making him kind of become this frantic quarterback who's rushing decisions and forcing throws because he's just trying to make the plays before he gets pressured. You have to make him comfortable to where that development path is a lot easier, and getting a stable starter in Will Campbell is a great way of doing that.
Yeah, Campbell is a really, really interesting prospect to me because I think he's like, if you put him at guard, he's gonna be like pretty elite day one. We're talking like Tyler Smith level of a guard just day one on the inside, which I think most teams would be pretty happy to take it for. If they're planning on taking him tackle, I do have some questions, but I I don't know. The Patriots, I feel like they're just kind of in a brutal spot here at four. And Campbell's not a bad prospect, but he's obviously not someone you ideally take at four. He does have like franchise like offensive tackle vibes, but it'd be such like an outlier pick that I don't know. I feel like this is just pretty disappointing for the Patriots. I wouldn't be surprised if they talk themselves into like a Genti or a Mason Graham or a Membu just to be like, we just need a better pick. We just need somebody who we think has like real superstar potential. And I don't know if Campbell has that at tackle. He certainly has it at guard, but who knows how valuable that is.
Yeah,
Moving on.
if
Oh,
oh sorry, I was just gonna say
so
if I
good.
were making the pick just based as me as GM, I'd probably go with Genti at four just because I think that impact of what he can be is very exciting, and I think that there is opportunity to trade up for an offensive tackle in this class. I like Ursary, even if they stay put at 38. I think he'd be a solid one. Trading up for a potential high end upside pick like Josh Simmons would make sense. So if I were making the pick just in my own interest in my own decision making, I'd probably go with Genti, but I understand the want of just trying to get the best tackle that you have graded highest in this class. And if that's Campbell, then it makes sense.
Yeah, the tier two offensive tackles is certainly interesting, but it seems like the Patriots are going Campbell, but let's see what you have them do on day two. At pick 38, you have them taking Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver from Ohio State. And at pick 69, you have them taking Jack Sawyer, edge from Ohio State. Michael, talk to me about these picks.
Yeah, I also have Joshua Farmer at pick 77 from the Matthew Judon trade. Overall, though, I feel like getting a guy like Ibuka is getting solidified production at wide receiver. You know, you can helmet scout all you want about Ohio State, but I think Ibuka is just also an extremely safe slots receiver that can kind of move around as you need him to. He can plug and play anywhere. I think he's dependable hands, really aggressive run blocker. He's someone that gets after it both as a route runner from the technique side. He has solid athleticism, solid size, solid physicality, and just I think all of those traits combined is going to offer a very high end floor in this wide receiver class where you are kind of needing that in your receiving room. You know, you have guys like Booty and Demario Douglas and Stephon Diggs that you can already rely on as decent pass catchers, but you need someone who's going to be a safe added weapon to this room. And I think Egbuka kind of provides that with the potential for possibly more. I mean, you can't really hate on a guy too much that he's just been outshined by like two of the greatest receiver prospects of all time and Marvin Harrison and Jeremiah Smith. So this is someone that maybe we don't know the ceiling that he has because he's just had to play second fiddle to some very talented wideouts. And maybe it's a Justin Jefferson case. Who knows? But we'll see. Ultimately, I think if the value's there at 38, it just makes too much sense for the Patriots, especially if you went O-line with that first pick. At 69, Jack Sawyer is a guy that I think has a lot of good traits. And I think when you're going into this third round, there's a lot of edge rushers that would make sense, but I don't think a lot of them have the combination of physicality, pass rush production, continued progression from year to year, and overall development that we've seen from Jack Sawyer. He's got nice size, he's got nice play strength. He does need to improve in terms of just overall finesse in order to be more productive and consistent as a pass rusher. But I think the ability and traits are there where you can easily buy in. And then Joshua Farmer, the board's a little weird here at 77. The Patriots don't have a lot of like big needs past these first three positions that were addressed. Running back's an option, you know, but I felt like the finesse backs that were on the board didn't really make a lot of sense for this time. So probably something that I'd address later. Added a guy like Farmer that I think is a high upside defensive lineman. And I think you can add some potential interior pressure into an already very talented room, especially with the question marks surrounding Barmore's long-term outlook.
Yeah, I think the most interesting pick here for me is like Buka at wide receiver. The Patriots have done a lot to add to the wide receiver room recently, to mix results to say the least. But I think when you said, look, you have Egbuka, you have Diggs whenever he's healthy, and then whoever that third person emerges ends up being maybe Douglas, maybe Polk, maybe Butte. It's really interesting, but I think this is what you got to do with May. You have to take advantage of that rookie contract. Take advantage of the rookie contract. You need to protect May and you need to give him weapons. And this is kind of setting him up for that year three leap that we see so many QBs take. And the biggest thing you want to do with May is make sure that he doesn't take the year two step back that we've seen so many other players take. And you want to, and the reason those players take a step back is the teams kind of get complacent with their QBs. They're like, well, we have enough for this guy. We don't really need to add more. Like that's what happened with CJ Stroud. And then injuries happen, and then suddenly Stroud is regressing. So I think to kind of avoid those kind of pitfalls is you have to continue to build upon your offense no matter how good May looks. And beefing up the defensive line is always something that Vrabel is going to do. New decision maker over there. That's how he dominated in Tennessee was through the defensive line. So not a surprising kind of predictive picks there for them.
And with the fifth pick of the draft, we have Dean Bruce representing his very favorite team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Dean, pick number 5. This is where things start to go a little bit crazy because I feel like the first 4, very chalk, very reported on, very covered. This is where everything can really go up in the air. What do you have the Jacksonville Jaguars doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I've got the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State, and I think it's just because part of it is because Liam Cohen has talked about how much he wants to supercharge the offense this year. He's an offensive guru. He wants an offense that can run as effectively as possible, and part of that is taking the best offensive player available, which to me I think is clearly Ashton Jeanty. Now, you mentioned that this is not like a chalk pick, but it has been reported on by a couple analysts, and I think it leans in sort of the philosophy that I think Liam Cohen is willing to go with this team. He's looking to stack the offense so that Trevor can succeed. We've sort of seen an up and down career progression from Trevor. I myself have worried about his progression, whether or not he's the franchise guy, and I think it comes down to giving him enough weapons to know if he can succeed. And I think we haven't really had a consistent run game. Travis Etienne, first round player, took him with Trevor, hasn't really panned out the way you thought you would, just because injuries and just sort of inconsistent health, sort of similar to Trevor. Tank Bigsby showed some life last year, but again, he was so bad in previous years, I'm not counting on it. I think Ashton Jeanty really solidifies the room, really solidifies the rushing attack, and can take the Jaguars to the next level offensively, which I think is what we're looking for as a team.
Yeah, one of the things that I think most impressed me with Cohen is that Tampa Bay's offense last year had such a creative run game. There were so many times where they're getting beaten in the trenches, but they were able to find ways with misdirections and counters and just utilizing the different skill sets that they had in their backfield in order to be productive on the ground. And it's a big part of why Bucky Irving was so good. But I think a lot of that credit also still goes to Liam Cohen and just what he was able to play call. So getting a guy like Ashton Jeanty, who I think is far and away best running back in this class. You can talk about running back value of all these different talented ball carriers, but I think Ashton Jeanty, you look at every analytical stat and it's just Genty's like far and away over in the top right corner where everyone else is kind of butched up in the middle. So he's just such a talented back. And I think working with a guy like Cohen, who's so creative on the offensive play calling asset or side of things, is just so talented to where it would be such a just dominant pick. And it helps Trevor Lawrence kind of find that comfort and rely on a run game that can help kind of make this offense really find its groove again, which it has very much struggled to do during the Press Taylor era.
Oh yeah, it's been depressing, and I think part of it is also you talk about him being the best running back available. He might be the best player in the class, and I think Jaguars are in a place where they need to go BPA. We don't really have a team that's built for a run, so maybe it's time to shake it up, get an offensive player, get a guy who can game change.
All right, and we'll talk about your day 2 picks later on because there's some phone calls going on.
Yeah.
And with the 6th pick, we got Trent here. He has been editing our videos all cycle. He's a machine, but he's also a Raiders fan, so he's excited to make this selection. Trent, Raiders got some interesting directions here. We've seen a few different names tossed out as the pick. What do you have them doing here at number 6?
Here at number 6, we got Armand Membou, tackle out of Missouri. Popular pick here and among Raiders fans. Ashton Jeanty. He went earlier in this mock draft, so I take the next best option in Membou. He killed the combine. He's got great height, great arms. He can move a pass pro. He got his run. He can finish. He can kick inside if he needs. DJ Glaze was right tackle for us last year. He played good. He can kick inside too. creates a good combination on the right side, I think. And you trade the third for Geno, you give him the contract, you got to protect him. It was a big issue in Seattle last year. They didn't protect him. This pick, I think, is his bodyguard for his tenure in Vegas, however long that is.
Yeah, I think Membu is a very exciting prospect. This tackle class seems a little bit jumbled at the top. Campbell seems to have taken the top spot amongst NFL teams, but when you look at most people in the media, they seem to have different rankings no matter who it is. Some people like Campbell, some people like Banks, some people like Membu, some people like Simmons, some people like Connerly. I mean, there's just anyone that you can find, and Membu is someone that I think is pretty consistently still towards the top for anyone's rankings, and it's because he's just such a stout, very promising, very athletic offensive tackle that has put together some really great tape from Missouri this year. And I think a lot of NFL teams are going to be very intrigued about what he can do to step in at right tackle and produce immediately. For some teams, that may be what he can do immediately at left tackle. But this is someone that I think is a very safe pick. And yeah, like you said, protecting Geno's got to be a top priority for the Raiders, getting that offensive line ready for the season. And I think that getting Membu here at 6 would be a great way of doing that.
Yeah, Membu is an interesting pick here for the Raiders because, last year they had some pretty solid tackle play, honestly, with Colton Miller and DJ Glaze. But like Trent said, you can easily kick Membu into guard, kick Glaze into guard. And when you're the Raiders right here, you just kind of have to go best player available for your offense, whoever you think would fit the best. There are some, rumors that they might look at a defender here. Maybe they'll go Graham, maybe they'll go Walker, but I think Membu's the right pick here. He's somebody who I personally have as my offensive tackle one. I've been a huge fan for a while, and it's a really good pick to kind of kick off this new tenure for the Raiders. Moving on to day two at pick 37, we have the Raiders selecting Siobhan Revel, CB from ECU, and at pick 68, we have the Raiders selecting Alfred Collins, sorry, for the tackle from Texas. Trent, you want to talk about those picks?
Yeah, Rebel's an easy one for me. The quarterback room has decimated this all season. Lost Nate Hobbs. They released Jack Jones. They don't really have anyone to replace them. Rebel's the best quarterback on the board at 37. He tore his ACL last year, didn't play. He didn't test at the combine, but there's no worries about his game. He's got great height, great arm length. He can run with anyone on the field. And it's a Pete Carroll guy with the size. Play man, play zone. And he's an immediate upgrade at CB2 or even CB1, depending how they view Ja'Cory Bennett. Alfred Collins, defensive tackle from Texas. It's really just BPA on the defense at this point. The D line does not really have a guy next to Christian Wilkins. I mean, interior, obviously Max Crosby, but interiorly, they don't have a guy to play next to Wilkins. And I think they need that, especially because the coverage will probably be spotty at best this year, and even the linebackers for that matter, too. So he can play day one, defend the run, and maybe become a pass rusher, too.
Yeah, Revel is a great pick for the Raiders, especially when you have someone who's I think is relatively safe in Membu. You can kind of maybe take more of a risk on Revel, who's somebody who's probably around one corner if he's healthy. You have to see how he recovers from that injury. And Alfred Collins, we're going to see this a lot throughout this block draft. Is just how deep this defensive line class is. A lot of teams just taking a defensive tackle round three because they have starter potential. And it's just going to be a very common occurrence throughout the draft, and it's going to probably leak into the real draft too. And Collins is a great fit in that Raiders defensive tackle rotation.
Yeah, very exciting players. And I think this is a great Raiders draft where you're starting to establish that defense, solidifying all the units that maybe need a little bit of bolstering. But overall, I think the Raiders are an exciting team that I think a lot of people are kind of anticipating could be competing for a playoff spot if the draft goes well. And I think with these first three picks, I mean, that's definitely going in the right direction in my book. So I like the draft here, and I think you did a great job.
There you go.
And with the 7th pick of the draft, Alyssa Kreutzer is here, and she has 4 different teams, but first one is the New York Jets with the 7th pick. Alyssa, why don't you walk us through the selection that you've made and give us some thoughts on it?
Yeah, so this one was pretty easy for me because the way that the board fell, I went with Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan. I've seen the rumors about Tyler Ward, and that was certainly in consideration. But when a talent like Mason Graham just falls into the lap for Aaron Glenn, I just feel like he's gonna take that card and run up to the podium for the Michigan man there. So I didn't really have any second thoughts on that one. It's pretty easy for me.
Yeah, it's a very exciting pick, and obviously, pairing Mason Graham up with Quinton Williams is something that
that's
could
a
be
fun
just
duo.
incredibly dangerous for the entire AFC East. As a Patriots fan, I'm terrified of the idea of Drake May having to sit through that, especially with our offensive line. But I mean, yeah. So when you look at this Jets team, obviously they have Justin Fields at quarterback. They have maybe a need at wide receiver. What kind of led to you going with Graham on the board? Is it just a BPA approach, or do you think the need is there as well?
Yeah, that one was just BPA. And as the years go on, it just seems more and more teams are getting more invested in the interior defensive line and getting the pressure in from the interior more so than just outside with the edge rushers. And Aaron Glenn's, he's a creative defensive coordinator. He's going to do amazing things with having Quinnen and Mason Graham disrupting the quarterback there. I did think about, going Tyler Warren because Fields does like his tight ends. I'm a Bears fan, so I've seen Fields play for several years now. He likes his tight ends. Thought about maybe going receiver with McMillan too, but just pure BPA. You can't pass up Mason Graham there, in my opinion.
Yeah, so pulling up the rest of this mock, you have Donovan Jackson at pick 42 and Elijah Arroyo, the tight end there at pick 73. Go ahead and walk us through your day two selections and give us a few thoughts on those guys.
So Donovan Jackson, that was another one where it was just BPA for me. He kind of fell in the lap there. There's a few other interior linemen that went before him, but I like his versatility he brings. I mean, he was 3-4 year starter at Ohio State, super solid at guard. Then when Josh Simmons, went down with that injury, he stood up for the team, was like, hey, I'll go out there and play tackle. And he did an incredible job for Ohio State. So I do like that versatility he brings. And the Jets, they do have a new regime, but they like having that versatility like Elijah Vera Tucker. He can play both inside and outside. So I just think that's a great fit for them would be Donovan Jackson. And then Elijah Arroyo, like I said, with Justin Fields, he likes his tight ends. And Elijah Arroyo is a great pass catcher, someone that can get open for Justin in the middle of the field with some seam routes and whatnot and get Justin just more comfortable in that offense. So I do like that fit as well. So, but that was pretty much it for the Jets. It's just, I let the board fall to me for that team. It's a pretty fun draft for them.
Yeah, an exciting draft for a Jets team that maybe doesn't have a lot of optimism for next year, but I do think there is a lot of potential to be a sneaky good team in that first year of Aaron Glenn era. Jets fans, let us know below how Alyssa did and your thoughts on the draft. And we'll talk to you later, Alyssa.
All right, thank you.
And with the 8th pick of the draft, the Carolina Panthers are on the board, and we are back with Dean Bruce. Dean, this is another interesting situation. Carolina was looking like they were heading for the gutter. A lot of people were resigned to the fact that the Bryce Young experiment had crashed and failed. They were going to have to take a quarterback. Everything was falling from the sky in Carolina. Now everything is sort of looking up. With the 8th pick of the draft, they still definitely need to hit on it, though. What do you have them doing here with this number 8 pick?
Yeah, I mean, they have to hit on it, and I think that's when you pick a guy who fits that scheme perfectly, and that's why I'm picking Jalon Walker, edge out of Georgia. They love that outside linebacker edge sort of like flex guy. I mean, we've seen it with Brian Burns work, and I think it's going to work even better with Jalon Walker. I'm a big fan of his tape. I think he is a very polished edge rusher. He's a very quick edge rusher. Part of me that is because he's about 245 pounds, so he's on the lighter end, but it makes him have this lightning quick get off. And he's not even like someone who can't flex back and do some coverage. You don't want him doing that full time, but he can play sort of a defensive weapon chess piece for the Panthers. And I think it's going to take some creativity to get him used correctly. And I think maybe top 10 pick is a little rich for him in terms of talent wise, but in terms of that scheme, I want Jalon Walker to go to the Panthers. And I think he will go to the Panthers. I think they really love this type of archetype of player. And I think it's going to be a guy that Panthers coaching staff falls in love with. And, they see that polished bag of pass rush moves. They see that lightning quick get off, and they see that well-balanced SEC production. I think they just see a proven player with a high floor that they need to get on their team to really boost that defense. I mean, the defense of Carolina has been really good in previous years, but last year it kind of took a tumble. I don't think Ejiro Evero paved out well for him like many were expecting. So I think, reloading that edge room is going to be really necessary for them, and I think it starts with Jalon Walker.
I was going to let you go, Bailey.
Yeah, Walker is someone who I think he's like a top 10 talent on the board. I think the Panthers kind of have no choice but to take him here. I do think as crazy as it sounds, it might be a floor pick for Jalen Walker at this spot. And like you said, he's kind of that hybrid. We've seen the Panthers have success with a player like this in the past with Frankie Louvu. And I think Walker is someone who can just, it's kind of weird to think of a player like this, but he can just like eat a lot of snaps. He can do a lot of things for your defense. He can lap a lot of different ways, and he helps your defense so much. When you talk about kind of floor raises for your defense, who can actually contribute in ways that don't show up on the stat sheet? When he's crowding up on the line, what is he going to do? You have no idea. Is he going to drop back? Is he going to rush? Is he going to be QB spy? He can literally do anything that's going to cause offensive lines to get confused in the protections. And a really good defensive coordinator is going to be able to create some really nice pressure packages, really nice blitzes with him. So I think even though maybe the pure like prospect value on paper isn't there, I think what he adds to a defense definitely makes him worthy of a top 10 pick.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add, but I think Walker is a very high floor player that you can add into that linebacker edge mold. And like you said, Avero has experience with Luvu to where he can kind of use him in that same type of role, same type of usage, and there's going to be a lot of value there. And I think having that disguise impact on that defense is going to bring so much value in a very attainable NFC South, which I think is under talked about for this Panthers team.
Yeah, they definitely should have some playoff aspirations if Bryce Young can take that next step forward. Moving on to day 2, at pick 57, the Panthers take Jalen Noel, wide receiver from Iowa State. And in round 3, at pick 74, they take Lathan Ransom, a safety from Ohio State. Dean, do you want to talk us through those picks?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is giving Bryce Young more support now that we know that the Bryce Young era isn't something that's completely over. I mean, giving Jalen Noel a quarterback who's evolving and still developing chemistry with these receivers, giving Bryce Young a speedster who can allow him to, uncork some of that deep ball that we saw him use at Alabama that he frankly hasn't really gotten the opportunity to use as much because he's playing with a bunch of big-bodied bad separators. So giving him a true separator, giving him a guy who can get into space like Jalen Noel, we saw a lot of that at Iowa State, pairing him with Jaden Higgins, pairing Jalen Noel with Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker, the two guys who I think are really going to unlock that offense. I think it's going to be a more balanced wide receiver room, and I think it's going to help Bryce Young develop. As for Lathan Ransom, I think, again, this is sort of a situation where Panthers have to go best player available, and that safety room, now that Jeremy Chin's gone, they need a new sort of strong safety body, so I think of the safeties on the board, Lathan Ransom most fits that mold. He's kind of a hard hitter, strong, steady tackler, a good presence in that secondary that you want sort of to, handle business, handle some of the run stopping, move downhill, but can also do some good work in pass rushing, pass coverage. He's not extremely stiff. He's a little, he's more of a strong safety. He's not going to play a ton of free. He's not going to roam around, do that center fielder role, but providing good run support for and a solid pass coverage back end, I think it's going to, help close down that defense. There were some like holes in that defense that got exploited a lot in that back end, and I think Lathan Ransom's going to help sort of clog those up and make sure that they aren't being exposed as often down the field by like say Tampa Bay if they're going to compete with that NFC South. I think he sort of provides a security blanket against Baker's sort of gamer mentality.
Yeah, I think the most interesting pick here is Noel for the Panthers. Like you said, the Panthers wide receiver room is kind of full of more possession guys, would be a nice way to call them. Slow would be another way to call them. We saw so many plays and so many concepts where wide receivers just aren't getting open. And, a lot of the blame fell onto Bryce Young. But at a certain point, you can't throw to somebody if they're not open. And Noel does add that extra dimension where you actually get a guy who has some speed, who has the separation ability. And like you said, this is the missing piece in their wide receiver room that has actually like some pretty solid depth. We saw Coker kind of break out. I'm not giving up on Legette yet. So there are some decent pieces here. And Noel could be that kind of final guy that they need to kind of elevate it to even being a good room, which is all I think Bryce Young needs. I don't think he needs a ton to kind of take that next step. And this is a really good pick to kind of help unlocking the full potential of Bryce.
Back like she never left. Alyssa is back, and this time representing the New Orleans Saints with the 9th pick. Alyssa, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so the Saints are super tricky for me because the Saints act like it's a dungeon. They don't let anything out on what they want. There is a lot of different avenues I could go. I went with Tataroa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. Chris Olave, his health concerns with his concussions, it's just you never know with him. Shaheed's a fun option, but he's not a number one player or number one receiver. McMillan, he's a fantastic receiver. I think he's one of those prospects that got a little bit of prospect fatigue as the draft process went on. 6'5", he can catch it all. Like he's a phenomenal player, and I think that the Saints just need someone in that room that can be a healthy pass catcher for whatever quarterback that Kellen Moore decides on. So I had a lot of different options. I could have went Tyler Warren there. I could have gone defense. I could have gone offensive line. The Saints have so many needs, but I feel like they've been lacking a good, capable, healthy receiver for a while. So I went with McMillan.
Yeah, first year of Kellen Moore as head coach. And I feel like this is an interesting situation because the Saints are in a pretty bad spot. I think a lot of fans would admit that with the cap space situation, there's just been a lot of talent that's been leaving the organization. They haven't had a lot of external moves because of that lack of cap space. So it's an interesting situation here at 9 where they could go in a lot of different directions. But Tyrell McMillan is a very exciting pass catcher on the boundary that I think matches up well, especially in a receiving group that lost Shaheed and lost Olave pretty early last year, and everything just fell apart. Getting in another pass catcher, that's exciting for whether it's Derek Carr or Spencer Rattler under center, or maybe someone else that you could be drafting later in this draft. Who knows? It's definitely an exciting pick, and I think you did a great job here at 9.
Yeah, I think with like the Saints, especially with how bad they've been drafting recently, you just kind of have to nail pick. So with a team with as many needs as this, I think you just kind of have to go and take your safest player available. And I certainly think that Ted McMillan fits that bill. So moving on to your day 2 picks. At pick 40, you do have the Saints taking a new QB in Jackson Dart. They also pick up CJ West at pick 71 and Jacob Parrish at pick 93. Alyssa, do you want to walk us through your thoughts there?
Yeah, so my thoughts on Jackson Dart is I've been seeing, they might take a quarterback and it might be Jackson Dart, and they don't really like Shedeur, so that's why I kind of struggled taking Shedeur at 9 because it didn't seem like that was really the fit. I went with Jackson Dart because he was one of the last top QBs available, if you want to say. And I think Kellen Moore, he would work well with someone like Jackson Dart. I'm not the biggest Jackson Dart fan, but I think he is someone that you can mold to be a decent starter. And Kellen Moore has found success with a lot of different quarterbacks. So I think Jackson Dart would be a good fit there. And hey, Ted McMillan needs someone to throw to him now, right? But for the round 3 picks, CJ West, I admittedly have not watched a ton of him. I just think he's, though, a good run defender, something that the Saints will really need. They just need help kind of all over the defense, in my opinion. So he'll instantly help Brian Brzee with that run defense. And Jacob Parrish, he's an athletic corner that I think the Saints could use in that corner room. It's pretty young, pretty inexperienced, but I like Parrish in there to develop with the new defensive back coach, Terry Joseph, who I'm so sad has left Texas. But best of luck to Mr. Joseph in New Orleans.
Yeah, it seems like the Saints, after you kind of go Ted McMillan the first, they are going BPA here, but it's like a needs-based BPA where they do need a new QB, they do need a new more interior defensive lineman, they do need another corner. There's not a team that can just kind of go pure BPA like kind of the Ravens do every season, but they just take the best player at a position which they need, which is a lot, but it's still kind of that needs-based draft that we see out of them. Obviously, Jackson Dart will be being the new QB and for the Saints is something I can definitely see Kellen Moore taking over there. He definitely wants a QB that he can develop, that he can kind of mold into his future ideal face of the franchise. And Dart, he definitely has the tools to be that. Might take a while for him to get there, but the potential is definitely there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of just like the Dart skill set and how you can kind of get that processing to that next level from what Hurts was as a prospect. The processing was a little bit of a question mark for Hurts, and he eventually kind of stepped it up as a passer and made those strides necessary. Obviously, the mobility is great, but it's that anticipation as a passer that's going to be so big for Dart if he can make those next steps in the league. And I think working with a guy like Moore, who also has the familiarity with a guy like Hurts, who overcame those issues and obstacles, it's going to help him out. And I like CJ West a lot as a run stuffer. I think that's going to help out. I like this draft for the Saints. Obviously, the Saints aren't necessarily on the brightest path, but I think this is a really good first 2 days of the draft, and it can inspire some optimism for them building forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she's not going anywhere because she is also the owner of the Bears' number 10 pick. Alyssa, a lot of talk about this pick. I think it's been one of the hottest commodities in terms of just what the Bears could do, what's going to be on the board. Are they moving up? Are they moving down? You stayed put. What do you have Mr. Poles doing with the number 10 overall selection?
Yes. So I am a Bears fan, so this one is more passionate for me. There's a lot of talk of the trading up with Ashton Jeanty, and let's just say I'm not for the trading up of Ashton Jeanty. Now, if Ashton Jeanty is there at 10, absolutely, fire away. But in this mock, he is not. And it's still been a question mark of what they're going to do at 10. No one really knows, but there has been rumors of Kelvin Banks getting a little bit more connected to the Bears. He had a private workout reportedly with us, which is what led to Darnell Wright being our pick a few years back. So due to that information, I did pick the offensive tackle Kelvin Banks from Texas. As I'm also a Texas fan, I can speak a lot about Kelvin Banks and his career at Texas. 3-year starter, instant impact as a freshman. There's no doubt that he helped turn around that Texas team. I mean, we had got a Doak Walker winner behind Bijan with him blocking, made back-to-back playoffs. He's a great prospect. I think it's just gone too far on Kelvin Banks on that hate. All really, I think, because the Georgia game was just okay. It was a disappointment to people. Like, he didn't have his best game, but like, he still was blocking Dallas Turner and Will Anderson as a true freshman. Like, let's rewind the tape on this guy and let's give him his respect. So I went with Kelvin Banks, who I think is a pretty safe prospect, all things considered. I know people are saying we spent a lot on the offensive line. Joe Thuney hasn't gotten a new contract yet, and Braxton Jones is going to be a free agent soon. I don't see a world where we pay both of them. I really don't.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. And, I'm a Texas fan as well, so we bonded over that, talking about Kelvin Banks in the entire draft process and football season. He's an exciting lineman, and he's one that felt like he was kind of sliding down boards a little bit earlier on in this draft process, but he's slowly starting to creep back up, and I feel like there's this correction process where everyone's like, okay,
yes,
let's stop all this hate on him. Let's acknowledge how good he is. He's a very exciting offensive tackle. He's someone that I think is definitely jumbled into this mix of guys that are being considered, are they a tackle? Are they a guard? I think he's a tackle. I think the measurements are there. The athleticism's there. Even rewatching the Georgia game, I felt like a lot of the issues that happened might have been more on Quinn Ewers. I think the pocket presence issues, especially near the goal line, he just needed to step up. And I think part of that is falling on Banks unfairly. I like the pick. I think this is going to be a great selection. I do like Braxton Jones, so it is a little bit of crowding in that offensive tackle room, especially when Amagaji is another guy that I like. So It'll be interesting to see how they handle their assets. And I do think that trading up for a guy like Jeanty is still on the table for this Bears team, especially with a guy like Poles. But we'll see what happens. I like the selection. And if Banks is a pick at 10, I think it's a really good job.
Yeah, I got to be careful about the Banks evaluation around you too. Little Texas homers, but
hey, I went there. Okay, I went there.
But yeah, from a pure kind of like fit standpoint, I do like this. This is definitely a kind of pick more viewed towards the future more than right now. It's kind of question mark, will Banks even start day one, which is weird for like a top 10 pick that's the non-QB. Usually those guys are instant starters, but the Bears have done a really nice job rounding out their roster. There's not a lot of holes. There's not a lot of floor raisers that they could select here. So Banks is kind of almost like a safe pick in the sense that even maybe if the evaluation's not there, in terms of their future after the season's done, they can go in a lot of different options with their pending free agents, knowing that they kind of have Kelvin Banks as that insurance policy.
Yeah, I don't think the Bears may not be drafting an instant impact at 10. I think it might be someone who sits a little bit, because even if you go edge rusher, you might be looking at Shamar Stewart, and that's not a day one player either, in my opinion.
Moving on to day 2, at 39, the Bears are taking Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle out of Ohio State. At 48, to take Caleb Johnson, running back from Iowa, and they finish it off with Jordan Birch, edge from Oregon. Alyssa, what are your thoughts on those picks?
Yeah, so the interior defensive lineman is something the Bears have keep talking about, and they keep adding. We added Grady Jarrett. We have Jervon Dexter. We have Zach Pickens, who hasn't really panned out. So it's just a position that we keep attacking, and we keep talking about during, press conferences. And we like Ohio State guys. We've been at several Ohio State things throughout the draft process. Tyleik Williams is a great player who can do both the run and pass pretty well. So I think that's a pretty seamless fit there. Caleb Johnson, look, the Bears are going to be drafting a running back. DeAndre Swift is not the guy. As much as I love Rochman, he's not the guy. Caleb Johnson is another guy that we've shown a lot of interest in. I would love if Travion Henderson was there, but he wasn't. That's who I think the Bears will be targeting against someone like that. But we have shown interest in Caleb, and I think he would do well in the zone schemes that Ben runs. So that's why I went with Caleb there. And Jordan Birch, that's just a guy that fits the Dennis Allen mold for an edge rusher. We need another edge rusher. We signed Dio to a pretty big contract. We have Montez Sweat, but we don't really have anyone after that. We have Austin Booker, but that was a different staff. That was with the Matt Eberflus regime. So I don't even know if Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen like Austin Booker. So there's just a wide open hole at the edge rusher position. So that's why I rounded it out with Jordan Birch.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Bears roster, and this is kind of a discussion what they're going to do at 10, is when you look at what's really the weaknesses on the roster. It's nose tackle and running back. Those are kind of the two positions that they don't really have on the roster of a player that's at least a starter quality guy there. And then Tyleik Williams and Caleb Johnson obviously fit those both needs pretty tremendously. So that's a pretty good day two combo or route two combo there, filling your both needs. And Birch as a depth guy is kind of perfect because, like you said, to kind of round out that rotation. I think this is kind of a killer Bears draft. I think most Bears fans should be pretty happy walking away with this haul.
Yeah, I think Poles is someone that he's pretty quick on his feet in terms of adapting to what he sees in the league. And I think watching the Eagles, it's hard not to take away, okay, if we load up on the trenches, we are going to be very good and we are going to have a huge advantage there. And adding guys like Birch and Williams, I think just gives you continued added ammo to that defensive line that, wasn't necessarily an issue for last year's team, but it's just once you continue to add that depth, once you continue to add difference makers, it's just going to continue to evolve and continue to be a strength of your team. And, Billings is fine. DeAndre Swift is fine.
Hey, no Andrew Billings slander. No Andrew Billings slander.
Look, they're all like solid pieces that you can plug in and you're all right with it. But if you can continue to evolve on those pieces and upgrade at those spots, you're just going to continue to elevate this roster. And, you don't want to take those shortcuts and the pieces that are just serviceable. You want to find those guys that are going to be difference makers. And Poles has kind of set up the roster to have that type of mindset where he's definitely not necessarily desperate at any position, but he can continue to upgrade at those spots. And I think you did a great job of doing that here with these picks.
Thank you. I hope so. I mean, it is the team I watch the most.
With the 11th pick, Trent is back, and he's picking for the 49ers this time. An interesting board again. There's some players that maybe would have been perfect for the 49ers, but are off the board. There's some players that are still available that still make sense. Trent, you have a lot of options. What are you doing here at number 11?
I'm sorry, on the defensive side again. Michael Williams, edge from Georgia. San Francisco, they've had a great D-line in the past, but they really have lost that, like what made them great these past few years. Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, Leonard Floyd, Samson Buchan, they're all gone. They don't have anyone to replace them. They tried to draft Drake Jackson. He didn't work out. Javon Kinlaw didn't work out. They tried to get Joey Bosa in free agency. That didn't work out. Now they turn here. Michael Williams with the 11th pick. He's an immediate upgrade in the run defense, which struggled last year at times. And he can develop into a pass rusher. He's a great complement to Nick Bosa, I think, who is kind of a speed rusher. I think Michael Williams can be powerful. He's still got a little bit of room to grow into his frame. He's not quite there yet, but in a year or two, I think Nick Bosa, Michael Williams, that's a top 5 duo on the defensive end line.
Yeah, I feel like, everyone's been tossing out the Trayvon Walker comp for Michael Williams. They just kind of expect that progression. I don't know if he's necessarily Trayvon Walker, but I think one thing that I did love about Trayvon Walker and something that I got excited about until he kind of became that number 1 pick in the draft was the idea of pairing him up with Robert Saleh. And now that Saleh's back in San Francisco, getting Michael Williams there at number 11 would be just so impressive for what this defense can do on that defensive line. He fits that scheme extremely well. Saleh's going to find ways to where Williams is going to fire into that backfield and build up production as a pass rusher. But that run defense and that physicality on the offensive line, the ability to control blocks and sustain the corner, that's huge. And that's something that you don't really get out of rookie defensive end prospects very often. Michael Williams has the physicality to be an NFL impact player on day one. And I really like the pick here at 11.
Yeah, you mentioned Derek Armstead, and I feel like that's kind of a good kind of usage maybe that we'll see out of Michael Williams on the 49ers. He's somebody who is already very stout as a run defender, and you're looking for him to develop that pass rush upside. Might not be year 1 for him, but year 2, like you said, with Nick Bosa taking all the attention and Williams can just kind of go power one-on-one with maybe some of the weaker tackles, he's gonna eat for sure. And this is a very dangerous pick for the 49ers. This is the pick that can kind of get them to rebound and make the playoffs and make another Super Bowl run. Moving on to day two, at pick 43, we had the 49ers taking Maxwell Harrison, corner from Kentucky. And at pick 75, we have Anthony Belton, tackle from NC State. Trent, do you want to talk about those? Oh, sorry. And then
I,
pick 100. Sorry. We have Aeneas Peebles. Peebles at pick 100, defensive tackle from Virginia Tech. Trent, do you want to talk about those picks?
yeah, I'll start with Maxwell Harrison. They lost Travarius Ward in free agency. I think Harrison's the replacement there. I think they like Renardo Green outside too, and they have Nord to play the inside. So I think Harrison kind of completes that cornerback room. He's a great athlete. He ran a 4.28 at the combine. He could play zone coverage. He could play man coverage. Obviously, when you have a great athlete like that, the run defense, the physicality, it's not really there. But I think that's okay. I think he'll make up for it in his coverage. 75, I have Anthony Bellin, the tackle from NC State. Trent Williams is already 37 years old. I mean, he's still the best tackle in the league, I think, but there's going to be a time where he falls off, and there's no replacement on the roster right now. And regardless, they need depth behind them in for the right side. I think Bellin can start year one at guard next to Puny, and I think he has great size, length, power. He's a brick wall. They had him in for a top 30 visit too, so I think they definitely have interest in there, and I think he could be a very long-term player for them. And the Peoples here, the 49ers have top 30 visits with defensive tackles. It's Walter Nolan, it's Omar Norman-Ott, and it's Aeneas Peoples. Those two first names are off the board, but they're all explosive pass rushers. I think they're not really hiding the cards here. They want pass rush. They're going for it. They don't care about run defense at defense tackle at least. And People says he's all right. He's got 6'1.5" height, which is not good, and his fourth percentile arm length. He's not much a run defender, but he can get after the pass in the pass rush. Great effort, and he can show up on obvious passing downs, I think.
Yeah, Peoples is explosive. There's some plays during the Senior Bowl where he just flew off the snap, where it's just impressive what he can do in that quick area and twitch. I mean, you can kind of trust Saleh to kind of scheme up the run game and run defense, but if you can get after the quarterback, that's how you're really going to disrupt these other teams. And I think the San Francisco 49ers are really investing into that. I love Belton. Hairston, he's such a San Francisco cornerback. Kind of reminds me of Ambry Thomas during that draft cycle where the speed, the ability to work vertical is there, but the physicality is somewhat lacking. Thomas didn't end up working out too well. He had a good rookie year, but then kind of fell off the map. But I still think that type of mold is something that San Francisco kind of looks for in the cornerback position. And it wouldn't shock me at all if Harrison is the pick here at 43. I think that's one that you absolutely nailed. So overall, this is a very 49ers draft, and I do really like it, though. I think this is going to be highly impactful. The only mistake you really made is that one of these third-round picks has to go towards running back. Don't you know the Shanahan rule?
Yeah, I know. He's got enough, though.
With the 12th pick of this draft, Wesley's here, and he is taking over the Dallas Cowboys. This is his team. And, we all know how much the Cowboys love the draft. The fans are consistently tuning in for the profiles of the players that they pick and boosting the views. So we appreciate them here. Wesley, this is a very interesting pick here for the Cowboys. They have a lot of options, a lot of different pathways that they could take. What do you have them doing here at number 12?
So the Cowboys, they make things pretty straightforward every year by leaving pretty big holes in the roster going into the draft. I'm allowed to say that as a fan, but this was kind of this was a tough situation. I'm usually hoping for McMillan here to fill that second receiver spot. He was gone. The dream is maybe Mason Graham falling, or even I know they're a big fan of Kelvin Banks to replace Zach Martin. Since he retired this year. And then even the stretch is, I know they're a big fan of Michael Williams, the Georgia edge rusher, went one pick before us. So this was a uniquely rough spot for the Cowboys. I ended up going with Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan. On paper, our cornerback room is pretty solid with our top two guys, Duron Bland, Trayvon Diggs. Trayvon Diggs is going to miss a lot of time with his second knee injury. Bland missed half the season last year, and he's got a contract situation coming up. And then after that, we've got not too much to work with. Traded for Kyer Elam, who I think can play in a pinch. But I think this is a pick that'll age pretty well. And personally, I'm a big Will Johnson fan. He was great early to start his college career, and he kind of followed the similar tendencies, I think, to Derek Stingley, where he maybe took his foot off the gas, sort of established himself as an elite player, and hoped that it would last to draft time. And I think it will. I think he's going to be really, really good, and is going to be a guy you're happy with on your team for a long time.
Yeah, this is someone that I don't know if I see him getting 12, just because I do think the talent's there. There's been like this narrative going around that because he didn't run his 40, he's not very athletic. He's plenty athletic. The in-game numbers are plenty fast enough. He has what it takes to operate on the boundary. He's got the instincts, the game IQ. He's going to be a star corner in the NFL. Yeah, for the Cowboys, I think the immediate need is a little questionable, but I mean, sometimes a player is so good it's just available and teams just have to do it. And I think Will Johnson kind of fits that mold.
Yeah, I think this year is a year for BPA and on the speed. Yeah, I knew he didn't do the 40, but I didn't see too many people catching him on his multiple pick six through his college career.
Yeah, like you said, it's kind of a rough run out for the Cowboys here. A lot of other picks that I think one of them will fall to them. It's just unfortunate that every single other pick that they would have considered here kind of just got taken almost in a row right before them. So I like Will Johnson. I don't think the players are that similar, but I think this is similar to kind of the Christian Gonzalez situation we saw a couple of years ago, where the NFL was just like weirdly low on this player, even though they were just very clearly good, and somehow they just fell, and then they go to the NFL and they're really good, and it's like, oh yeah, we messed up. But it seems like the NFL might be letting that happening of Will Johnson, where I don't know if they're saying he's not a top 10 pick, the Cowboys I'm sure will love to take him at 12.
Yeah, and the last defender we took at 12 turned out pretty well too. So
Moving on to day two, at pick 44, we had the Cowboys selecting Quinshon Judkins, running back from Ohio State. And at pick 67 in the third round, we have the Cowboys selecting Jack Bech, wide receiver from TCU. Wesley, you want to explain those picks?
yeah, so second round Quinshon Judkins. I think this is going to make a lot of fans happy. Ohio State runner, huge run in the playoff. And obviously running back is a pretty big need. I do think that we might want to take another running back in this situation a little bit later. Brashard Smith, or LaQuint Allen, somebody who's more on the pass catching side, because that is sort of a blind spot for Judkins. But I think with how big the need is and how talented the player is, it's an easy option in round two for us. Truthfully, I did try to trade up and couldn't get any partners in the second round because Emeka Egbuka and Luther Burden were both falling. So missing on McMillan in round one, but then having the value in round two would have been pretty good. But it's a little hard to maneuver when you're missing your fourth round pick, which is kind of the prime spot to trade up in the second round. Third round, I was pretty excited. I did end up getting a trade up for Jack Bech. I got a little scared into the second. Four receivers went in a row, and I was trying to wait it out, and I got a little scared. So I jumped up for Jack Bech, my last second round talent receiver, and a guy who I think is literally the perfect match for CeeDee Lamb. Somebody who can go on the outside, move around a little bit because CeeDee Lamb isn't always in the slot, but he's going to be your reliable downfield guy, good blocker, consistent hands, can do some damage in the seam where Dak really likes to target his receivers. And I think a little scary in round one, missing our initial targets, but pretty good additions to the offense. And I think Will Johnson's going to be a good long-term option as well. So as a Cowboys fan, I'm sure there's going to be some thoughts, and I maybe would have liked to sneak in a defensive tackle somehow, but pretty happy with the haul.
Yeah, this is some really good players you got. Judkins I feel like is a really good Cowboys fit. What you're looking for somebody who can carry the load right now. The Cowboys don't have a ton of guys you really want to give carries to in that backfield. So any rookie they take, if it's in kind of that day one or day two range, is going to see a lot of carries. And Judkins has proven that he can be that bell cow workhorse back. And I think he's getting a little underrated by I think the draft community, especially because maybe got outshined at OSU by Henderson, but he's a really good player, and this is a good spot for him. And with Bech, the Cowboys need somebody opposite CeeDee Lamb, and I feel like this might be an interesting pick, just because a lot of times you kind of want to play CeeDee Lamb out of slot, and I think that's where maybe Bech projects best at the next level. So maybe we'll see him a little bit more outside, but he is kind of that strong possession receiver that the Cowboys really need.
Yeah, all around, it took some patience, but I think it worked out pretty well.
And with the 13th pick, you might think that it's the Dolphins, but you are absolutely wrong because it's the Los Angeles Chargers trading up with this pick, and Saavaidra finally making his first appearance here with GMing. Welcome to the mock, Sav. What do you have the Chargers doing here at pick number 13?
All right, so well, my first thought really was that the Dolphins, with what's on the board right now, they couldn't get Kelvin Banks, they couldn't get Will Johnson. It's either at that point Shamar Stewart or Nick Immanwori, and I don't really feel like they would just take Stewart here. I think they would want an offensive lineman or a safety or really just anything else, even like Jedi Barron. So I just had them trade back, and I felt like this is the perfect spot for a team to come up and snipe the Colts for Loveland because I think Loveland's going to Indy if he makes it there.
Makes sense. So you have the Chargers going Colson Loveland with this selection. Obviously, Harbaugh has a little bit of experience with Loveland in his offense. What do you think that type of player can make impact on this Chargers offense, especially for a QB like Justin Herbert?
I think they just need weapons, like in general. Ladd McConkey's the only consistent weapon they have. Loveland can actually run routes downfield and isn't just like a guy who's going to catch balls in the slot and like on screens because he really doesn't even like if there's any issue he has in college, it's like he doesn't make a lot of guys miss, but at the same time, he doesn't get the opportunities to do that because he doesn't catch any screen passes.
Yeah, I think Loveland is kind of an interesting fit on the Chargers just because we saw how much they wanted to feature Will Dissly kind of to a disgusting amount last year where he's just getting way too many targets than he really deserves. And so if they still have that kind of desire to go to the tight end spot, I think they had a great hit on the draft with Ladd McConkey, who can kind of do that separating over the middle stuff. And then you add Loveland, who is just, you need pass catches for Herbert. Herbert last year was trying to force a lot of stuff. His wide receivers just were not good enough on paper and just couldn't get open for him. We saw him, especially in the playoff game against the Texans, just force a lot of stuff. And if you're the Chargers, you just can't let that happen again. Loveland is somebody who can really take that Chargers offense to that next level where they can kind of, have that what they used to have with, Allen and Mike Williams and kind of regain them to that status as Harbaugh continues to build out this roster that he took over last year. Moving on sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, I mean they've got Mike Williams back now, but you can't really trust Mike Williams at this point or Quentin Johnston to really reliably do anything. I mean, Quentin Johnston is really more of the screen guy that you're gonna fill that kind of gadget role with at this point.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they deploy Loveland. I assume it'll be very similar to how Michigan deployed him, just because of the similarities between the offenses. So it should be a very nice transition for him. Moving on to day two, at pick 55, the Chargers select Carson Schlesinger, a linebacker from UCLA, and at pick 86 in the third round, they select Deion Walker, defensive lineman from Kentucky. Sav, do you want to talk about those picks?
Sure, I'd love to. I mean, Carson Schlesinger is just really good. He's got sideline to sideline range and I mean, the only real issue I have with him is that he's just got the 1 year of tape because he was only a starter this year. And he also didn't do full testing, which is a little odd, but I think he had a hamstring issue that prevented him from doing that. Then, really, the third round pick is the one I think is more interesting. It's Deion Walker. Deion Walker has fallen from being a first rounder to wherever he's going to actually end up. He was not in Daniel Jeremiah's top 150. He is falling in every mock that everyone is doing, but his production numbers are still fantastic. It's just the testing is strange. I don't think he's actually a nose tackle, which people seem to be projecting him at. I think he's more of a 3-4 defensive end or a 3 tech. And I feel like I'd rather have him starting for my team than Deshaun Hand or Otito Ogbonia at this point.
Yeah, it's an interesting fit. Deion Walker is someone that I think I loved him in the summer, so I still have hope for him. And I agree with you. I don't think he's necessarily a nose tackle. He's someone that you probably bring in and you're kind of hoping that he can drop weight, maybe tune up his body a little bit, maybe get down into that 330, 320 range more. And I think there's a next level of athleticism that he can have, but it'll be interesting. One thing I've heard about with Schlesinger that I thought was really interesting is that a lot of people view this linebacker class as Campbell, Schlesinger, and then it's just everyone has a jumbled order. No one has a set like
I have a third guy that I'm really high on, and then a jumbled order after that.
yeah. So it's just like it wouldn't shock me if this is someone that maybe gets a bump because a lot of people want to say BPA, get the best value, but a lot of it's about playing the board. And there's going to be teams who are saying, yeah, we have linebacker as a big need, and maybe they view Schlesinger high enough where they're willing to take that early in that
Yeah,
second round.
I was a little surprised he got to me at that pick, and I was not surprised Deion Walker got to me at that pick. And he was the only defensive tackle left on the board at that pick, but I would have picked him anyway. And with him, he did weigh 328, I think, at the combine. But the player he tested most like was Michael Brockers, who ended up at 297.
Very strange player, that's for sure. It's going to be interesting to see where he lands. But yeah, just overall, it's a really exciting draft for the Chargers team that I think really made some impressive strides with the new regime, and I think that's going to continue to see growth for this team moving forward. So getting some contributors in those first two picks and an upside swing in round three, I don't hate it at all. And with the 14th pick, Wesley is back like he never left. Indianapolis Colts are on the board. This is an interesting one because, if you would have told me that Tyler Warren wasn't the first tight end off the board, it'd be pretty interesting. What do you have the Indianapolis Colts doing here at 14?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a realistic situation in this scenario. Loveland ended up going right before us in a trade up scenario. I guess y'all probably just heard the pick, so I wouldn't spoil it. If I think some team would be trading up, it would probably be for Warren. I think he's number one tight end on most boards, but the Michigan connection with Harbaugh and I think Loveland being a great fit with Justin Herbert. It makes sense if the Chargers, if anybody were going to trade up, it would be one to snipe the Colts and two to take Loveland. But about Indianapolis, I think they're still very excited here. I'm sure Colts fans are a little tired of the tight end picks, but when the talent and the need matches so perfectly like it does in the first round here for them, it just makes sense. And I think it's pretty exciting for them to get an opportunity to see Warren on their team because Shane Steichen really likes to work his scheme, really likes to move people around. And everywhere he's gone, he's really utilized the tight end pretty creatively. And Warren is a guy that you can do that. You get the physicality and the, running ability of Warren and Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor and another player you'll see in a little bit on the Colts. It's going to be a very exciting and physical offense. I don't think any defense in the league is going to want to go four quarters with these guys.
Yeah, I think for a guy like Warren, you have to be ready in terms of just the type of player that he is. He's someone that caught about a quarter of his passes behind the line of scrimmage on screen targets. He had a lot of manufactured touches, whether it's direct snaps or handoffs or whatever. Like he's a very unique type of tight end. But I think with this Colts offense where you have 3-4 guys that are making plays downfield as playmakers up the field, Downs, Pierce, Mitchell, Pittman, they're all kind of like wide receivers that I don't think there's necessarily anyone who's just like star-studded wide receiver in that group. So having a guy like Warren in the middle who can kind of be this versatile playmaker at the tight end spot, I think it kind of fits well. I know a lot of people think that Loveland's a better fit just because he's this great athlete, which is what Ballard has consistently kind of chased from the tight end spot. But I do think there is some intrigue with what Warren can bring to this almost like five-wide attack that they have now, where you're trying to find rotation of pass catchers, a rotation of playmakers. And I think he kind of makes up for that maybe lack of established true wide receiver one by adding another very good, very valuable tight end in that 14 slot for this Colts team.
Yeah, and I think the offense can develop around Anthony Richardson really well in this situation. I'm still a believer, but if you're going to build an offense for him, you kind of want field stretchers and then short yardage run after catch guys. And so that is, Downs can get down the field, Pierce and AD Mitchell can get down the field really well. And then if they stretch the field, create a little bit of space and you toss it underneath to Warren and he just wrecking balls his way down, I think it's a good option.
Yeah, Warren is a lot of people knock him for the manufactured touches, but if you're the Colts, much love to Anthony Richardson, but you kind of want him not throwing the ball as much as possible. So when you have something like Warren who can produce with those screens, those quick passes, you kind of don't force Richardson to make too many decisions, which is what I think the best plan for him moving forward is I think Warren might be a better fit for the Colts than Loveland anyways, just because Loveland doesn't have a ton of experience doing that. So yeah, I really liked his pick for the Colts in terms of their fit and how are you going to build this offense to best around Anthony Richardson at this point, because Ballard and this entire regime is kind of pot committed to Anthony Richardson succeeding. So their first step is how best can we help him, succeed as a quarterback and make the playoffs again. Moving on to day 2, at pick 45, you have the Colts selecting Benjamin Morrison, corner from Notre Dame. And at pick 80, we have Scatibo, running back from Arizona State. Wesley, you want to talk about those picks?
Yeah, so Ben Morrison out of Notre Dame. I think this is about the right value for him. He is another corner who's had a long and successful career and really proved on the field that he deserves to maybe even be a borderline first round cornerback. But now he's dealing with his second hip surgery, which is really scary for a corner. But the rumors, as much as we can tell, are that he's got some good news recently about it. And if he can come back to full health, I think this probably fills their biggest need on really their entire roster. And I think he's a talented boundary corner that can assimilate with Lou Anarumo's scheme pretty much immediately. He's got the experience, he's got the chops. I think he'll do well. And hopefully him and Juju Brents is they're able to stay healthy together, but it's a little bit of a gamble, which you could maybe argue that Steichen and Ballard need to hit on to keep their jobs. And Scatibo, whichever one it is, he's just a really fun pick. And I think he got a little overhyped early in the process where he was sneaking into the top 50, which I think is a little too rich for him. And just because of his physical limitations, but right here, mid third round, and specifically in this Colts offense, where again, Jonathan Taylor is going to run you down. In this situation, Tyler Warren's going to wear you down. And then you bring in the finisher, Scatibo, to not only run through people, but he is a sneaky good receiving back, which is a big blind spot for Jonathan Taylor. So I think it's a good complement to the offense. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, hopefully gets the ball out of Anthony Richardson's hands a little bit more consistently and gets him some easier options.
Yes, Colts fans know about pass catching running backs after that Minshew incident, as well as leave it at that, keeping them out of the playoffs. And Benjamin Morrison is an interesting fit for the Colts, who they signed Travers Ward to a pretty big contract, but I mean they're still looking for more corner help. Juju Brents, I think, was very promising as a rookie, but who knows if he's really ready for the snaps after so many snaps after the injury, and so same with Benjamin Morrison. So I think the hope is one of them can stay healthy and you have some insurance for your secondary that got torched. The Colts secondary was really, really bad next year. So, I mean, really, really bad last year. So this is something that they absolutely need in terms of their defense moving forward. You need to be able to stop passing attacks, especially in the AFC South that's loading up on QBs and offensive talent.
Yeah, I think that cornerback unit of Brenton Jones from last year, it's very, Gus Bradley centered, but a lot of those guys aren't necessarily going to fit into this new regime. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking at cornerback, and maybe it's something that they even look at in the early rounds as a round one type situation. But getting a guy like Morrison, who has first round tape in his history, if he's healthy, he's going to be a guy that is probably just an absolute steal in this class. I really like the fit, and I think he can be that cornerback too. It helps lessen the blow when you have a guy like Ward that you can really kind of depend on and rely on early in his career, and see if he kind of takes those strides to where he can eventually be that cornerback one by the time Ward is maybe a little bit older and unable to handle that type of workload. And then, Scatibo is a guy that I think a lot of people would be kind of like, oh, they need like a finesse back. They need the guy that's going to be making the quick plays on the outside because Taylor's his power guy. But there are a lot of teams that operate with the lightning approach or the thunder approach. And having this thunder approach of Taylor and Scatibo would be very punishing for defenses that are already going to have to deal with the thunder approach of Tyler Warren and the thunder approach of Anthony Richardson. So having that like combination of just wearing down defenses, I think is something that would be very intriguing for this Indianapolis team if the draft went this way.
Yeah, and I can hear Colts fans now I do agree that linebacker probably should have been a target. The value didn't really work with anywhere that I was picking outside of the first round. But if it does make you happy, you could probably flip Tyler Warren for Jihad Campbell in the first, and then maybe target a Mason Taylor or Terrence Ferguson later, which I think would be a good fit with the team as well.
And on the board, number 15, Jack Donovan is back with the Atlanta Falcons. Some interesting options on the board for a defensive-minded coach like Raheem Morris, a very exciting offensive mind in Zach Robinson, an offensive coordinator. What are the Falcons doing here at 15, Jack?
Yeah, I think they're in a very interesting spot. I have them taking Mike Green out of Marshall, the edge rusher. The Falcons, I feel like it's been 10 years that they've been needing a pass rusher, and, it's no different this year. It's been the last time they had a guy with 7 sacks was 2019. You have to go all the way back to 2016 when they made the Super Bowl to get a double-digit sack player. So this is where I think Green makes the most sense. He's probably the best finisher in the class right now, as far as actually finishing plays and bringing the quarterback down, and that's what they need more than anything. So getting a guy like him who is experienced, is technically sound, can win with speed, can bend around the corner, I think that's the biggest thing they can do to improve their defense right now and really kind of give this pass rush the spark that it's been looking for a long, long time.
Yeah, Green's a very exciting pass rusher and probably has some of the better hands in terms of just polish and ability to win with swipe and all his different moves in his toolbox. He's got a versatile skill set there. The off-field stuff is definitely something that is going to be interesting. It wouldn't shock me if Green's someone that we start to see maybe slip down the board, and NFL teams are saying, "Oh, we are worried about it." But at the same time, this is the NFL, where a lot of teams seem to be willing to turn a blind eye to that. We know the Falcons were involved in the Deshaun Watson negotiations. So, it wouldn't shock me if they're a team that's willing to kind of overlook this for Mike Green and get a talented edge rusher. But sticking to on-field stuff, I do think he makes a lot of sense for Raheem Morris. This is a guy that kind of prioritizes pass rush and says, I will scheme stuff up to make up for any lack of run defense. And, I think a guy like Mike Green, little undersized, but the speed, the bend, the overall tool set, there's a lot to like about what he can bring to a pass rush, and the Falcons desperately need it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a bit of maybe a more one-dimensional guy that you would see compared to most top 15 picks, but I think he's just so good at getting to the quarterback, and they just need that so desperately above anything else that it's something they feel good about taking here.
Yeah, I think this is in all three mock drafts we've had on this channel so far that we've given the Falcons Mike Green each one. We're going to keep doing it. It just makes too much sense. I don't think there's anything original or new I can really add to this pick at this point, but this is something we hopefully see on draft day. Moving on to day 2, the Falcons with only one pick in the second round, pick 46, TJ Sanders, defensive tackle out of South Carolina, after trading their third for Matthew Judon. Jack, you want to talk about that pick?
Yeah, it's similar to the first round where they just need to keep adding to that pass rush. I think TJ Sanders is very disruptive. They let Grady Jarrett go this offseason, so they've got kind of a void there on the interior, especially as a guy who needs to rush the passer a little bit. So I think Sanders kind of fits really well. He's pretty versatile. You can move him around a bit, which in Raheem Morris' scheme, I think is pretty important, kind of having that versatility in the front. So I think this is a good fit. It's a guy they brought in for a visit, so there's clearly some interest there, at least, some curiosity. He was at South Carolina. They were a really good defensive line last year, a lot of talent on that unit. So I think bringing in a guy like Sanders is going to really inject some more youth and some more talent into this pass rush that just desperately needs it.
Yeah, I think we saw how aggressively the Rams attacked the defensive line in the drafts in recent years, and I don't think the Falcons will be any different. So I kind of like this idea or this approach of double dipping on the front four there. And TJ Sanders is a 3-down guy. You kind of, like you said, align him in a bunch of different things, and Rook Aurora didn't really hasn't really broken out in the way I think they've expected him to. And so there's a lot of snaps for him to get here. So I think this is somebody who will be an immediate impact player for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of pass rushing interior defensive linemen in this class. So Raheem Morris will have his pick of the litter. And I think that lines up perfectly for this draft and what you did in this mock, where, you get the premier pass rusher off the edge early, and then you take whichever you kind of prefer between, guys like TJ Sanders, Shamar Turner, who you talked about earlier. Omar Norman Lott could even be a guy who kind of fits that Raheem Morris kind of mold. And I think it really lines up with what the Falcons are trying to do in this draft. And it wouldn't shock me if they have a very similar first and second round pick in their real life draft. And I think it'll be the right direction for them to take.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been looking almost exclusively at defense on their visits. So I think it's going to be defense, defense, defense for them.
And with the 16th pick, Wesley just continuously popping up in this section of the draft. The Arizona Cardinals are on the clock, and Wesley, you know what you're doing here. Go ahead and make the pick.
Yeah, I'm sure they're tired of me by now. Cardinals are interesting. They're being in the middle of the round of this first round. It's kind of, you can never really know who's going to fall. And so usually you're there and just try to figure out what brings the most value. Guys that probably shouldn't be there. Personally, I think Derek Harmon out of Oregon, defensive tackle, was a great value for them in the middle of the first round. They have Calais Campbell now. They have Dalvin Tomlinson now in the middle of their defense. But obviously those dudes have quite a bit of experience between them. So getting a younger guy, especially when with so much upside like Derek Harmon, who not only has pass rushing chops, but is also very reliable as a run stopper, and learning from a great pass rusher and a great run stopper in the two veterans that they have. I think it's a good move that should help them immediately in rotational places, and then also really guide them towards their future with their relatively young team.
Yeah, Harmon's a very exciting player, and the production was just undeniable. He's someone that I think really kind of took those massive strides, and he's kind of a great example of like why the transfer portal is still something that people should be excited about. At Michigan State, he was very good, but I feel like he was used more as a run stuffing type of guy that kind of just occupied space. Oregon really let him loose and let him kind of unleash next to Jamari Caldwell, and he was really just able to take those next steps and prove himself as an elite prospect in this class. Personally, I do like Walter Nolan a little bit more, but I think both these guys are just so intriguing, and it seems like the NFL's higher on Harmon. So I'm expecting Harmon to be the guy that goes in this top half of the first round. And I think for Arizona, Jonathan Gannon still looking to kind of build up this defense. It would make a lot of sense if Harmon lands here at number 16.
Yeah, and I was going to say he was used to really good defensive tackles whenever he was over in Philadelphia, but he was also used to good edge rushers and corners and linebackers and pretty much everything. They've got a full toy chest over there. And I'm more of a Harmon than a Nolan guy, but I think any of that next tier, Harmon, Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, and then Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, any order they come off, I think it's going to make sense for the team.
Yeah, I think Harmon's probably a better fit for what the Cardinals look to run defensively than Nolan, where Nolan's more of the penetrator type, and then the Cardinals defensive scheme, he wants somebody who can two gap and be a little bit more sound in the run stopping department in terms of there. And Harmon is somebody that it's really hard to gauge a draft range on just because of how stacked his defensive tackle class is. I can see him going as high as like 11, and I can see him going like all the way to 31 to the Chiefs. So this is somewhere maybe near the higher end of his range, but the Cardinals, they didn't get to see any production out of Darius Robinson last year, who figures to the lineup next to Harmon. And like you said, they brought some guys in, but I think that's more of like this, more like we have a ton of money and let's just go spend it. Then these are long-term pieces, like you said so nicely, between Calais Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson. A lot of experience, which means they're pretty old, and I don't know how many years or how many snaps you really want to rely on them for. So I definitely see them going somewhere, making a pick like this and picking up a defensive lineman in the first round. Moving on to day 2 at pick 47, the Cardinals are selecting Tate Ratledge, guard from Georgia, and then Michael, you're going to have to pronounce his name. We've run into this issue before. You're going to cover me.
Pick 78, the Cardinals are taking Princely Umanmielen.
Wesley, you want to talk about those picks?
Yeah, of course. So Tate Ratledge in the second round, I think that's probably, there's 2 big areas that they can upgrade on offense, and that's going to be interior offensive line, maybe tackle as well, but not usually outside of the first round. But I think bringing in Tate Ratledge, who has multiple years of starting at Georgia and has been as consistent and reliable against the best competition as you could expect. And then he went out in the combine and put out one of the best guard performances of all time. That just shows how high his upside is. I think that's a guy you can kind of plug in and count on to be a starter for the next 5 to 10 years. And pretty good value there. There's an interesting cluster of guards in the second round with Tyler Booker and Donovan Jackson, if you're keeping him inside, and a few others. And I think Ratledge maybe has the highest upside of any of them, arguably Donovan Jackson, and was one of the ones that was falling. So he was a good value as well. I was pretty excited about that pick. Third rounds, Princely Umanmielen. Really, I thought I was always confident about his last name, but at the Senior Bowl, they were pronouncing it as Trent Szilli all week, and that really threw me off. But it's Princely Umanmielen. This was just a great value. I think they actually have a pretty deep war chest in their pass rush room with adding Josh Sweat. They've got Darius Robinson, who's more of a interior flexible and run stopping guy, kind of your big edge. But Zaven Collins, they're still hoping for a little bit more out of him. And I know Baron Browning has some fans as well. But I've got Princely as a borderline first rounder. I'm a little bit of an island at that, but he is a pure pass rusher and I think could rotate perfectly with Darius Robinson on pure pass rush roles to start off and then develop into a little bit more. This guy has crazy speed. He's got great hands. He probably has 5 of the fastest pass rush wins in the entire class this year. And that's the name of the game when getting to the quarterback. The only thing I wish I would have targeted, I considered in the first round, looking at Matthew Golden instead of Derek Harmon, just because I think they have locked Marvin Harrison Jr.'s ceiling a little bit by keeping him mostly on the outside in that primarily X role. So getting someone who can run a lot of those deep outside go routes and primarily X routes and let Marvin Harrison Jr. maybe go more into a CeeDee Lamb type role where he is dynamic. He can use his full release package and his incredibly quick feet to make plays all over the field. That's something that I would like for them, but didn't quite work out and probably isn't their highest priority, just sort of on the wish list for me.
With the 17th pick, I am on the clock, and the Cincinnati Bengals are in dire need of defensive help. I'm going to go with Shamar Stewart, edge rusher out of Texas A&M, a high upside player that I think can add in a lot of intrigue for what he can develop into for that Cincinnati team. But I also think that the day one impact he can bring is a little underrated. I feel like a lot of people just assume that he's this like ball of clay that just has no idea what he's doing. But Shamar Stewart has a lot of really nice flashes that I think are still very productive parts of his game to where he can contribute right away in the NFL. He's maybe not going to be a high sack guy, but I think in terms of just overall power, ability to collapse the pocket, and ability to maybe add those moves and pass rush development in that first offseason is something that could really help him kind of get into that 5-6 sack range and be a contributor in year one. Trey Hendrickson is obviously the star of this defense, but they need additional pieces on the defensive line. Sam Hubbard retired. Miles Murphy didn't really take the steps that you're looking for. Getting a piece like Shamar Stewart, who is so physical, so aggressive at the line of scrimmage, if you can develop him, I mean, this is a huge way of improving a defense that is in desperate need of help.
Yeah, I feel like the Bengals will go a couple different options at edge here. I do think this pick will end up being an edge. It's clearly the biggest weakness on their team besides offensive line. But with the resources you kind of just invested in your offense, I think you kind of have to go defense, especially with all the talent they've drained. You fired your DC. You kind of need a new guy, new identity. I think Shamar Stewart is a really good pick here. He's somebody that if you told me this guy was a lock for the top 10, I don't think anyone would really bat an eye. But just due to the nature of this draft, he ends up falling to 17. And I really like Stewart. I think his upside is really good. We obviously know how great of a tester he is. If you look at his raw numbers, obviously aren't super impressive, but if you turn on the tape, he's winning a lot of his reps. I think he's a lot better than what he's being given credit for, kind of, just like a raw guy, like you said, like the ball of clay. But I think he's surprisingly refined. So this is obviously a really good pick for the Bengals. And if they get him and they develop him like haven't been able to do with Miles Murphy, but maybe they could be successful with him. That's going to be a very scary edge rotation. Moving on to the day 2 selections, at pick 49, the Bengals are selecting Xavier Watts, safety from Notre Dame, and at 81, they select Danny Stutzman, linebacker from Oklahoma. Michael, talk to me about those picks.
Yeah, so Xavier Watts is an interesting case because he didn't really test as well as people had kind of hoped. So there's maybe room for him to fall back a little bit in terms of draft value, but Al Golden knows this guy, and I think he's going to be a huge piece of kind of reigniting that secondary for Cincinnati. And Stutzman's just such an uber athletic linebacker that has great size, great production, and just great physicality to where I think he kind of fits into that Bengals mold. They like the bigger linebackers. They like those guys that can kind of move around the field, offer that sideline to sideline range, and have that aggression to really attack inside the trenches and make an impact. And I think Stutzman brings that to the table. Just looking at these picks, there are some obvious holes that maybe are left unaddressed in those first 3 picks that some teams would, or some fans would maybe complain about: offensive guard, maybe defensive tackle. But I don't know, looking at a guy like Sedarius Slayton, I think he's a little bit underrated, and I think he can kind of provide that nose tackle ability. BJ Hill's fine as a 3-tech. If you can get that edge pressure from Shamar Stewart added to that room, if you can address safety with a guy like Watts, if you can add linebacker, especially with the uncertainty of Jermaine Pratt's future, I think there's still a lot of optimism. And I think offensive guard is a position you can still address on round 4, round 5, and still find someone that you can probably plug and play or get a veteran on the open market.
Yeah, this is like kind of like a sunk cost fallacy Bengals draft where, you kind of have some safety players, but maybe they aren't panning out the way you have to. Instead of just being like, let's cross our fingers and hope they work out this year, you kind of just suck it up and say, you know what, it didn't work. Let me just try again. Same thing with linebacker. You do have a decent amount of resources invested in there, but at the end of the day, those are not like not starter level players, but those are guys that, didn't play that well last year. And you can't just cross your fingers and be like, okay, maybe they'll regain their 2022, 2023 form. You kind of have to just address the situation head on. And the Bengals offense is not the problem with the team. It is very clearly the defense. And here you do a 3 defense draft to address all 3 levels of the defense with the defensive line, linebacker, and the defensive back. So a new Bengals defense after this mock draft.
New era. Gotta see if he can make it work, because can't waste that offense. It's too good. And Alyssa is back for the Seattle Seahawks at pick number 18. The board's fallen pretty interesting. There's a lot of different options that they could do. Mike McDonald, the defensive-minded coach, John Schneider, has been kind of adamant about fixing up the offensive line this offseason, but maybe he won't do it in the first. What do you have them doing here at 18?
Yeah, so I do have them going interior offensive lineman. I almost went Jahad Campbell for them, but I went with Gray Zabel, the interior offensive lineman from North Dakota State. I just think the Seattle Seahawks need something on that offensive line, especially on the interior. Zabel's played all over that line throughout his career in North Dakota State. Most likely a center, but if you like what you had in your center last year, I don't know how to say his name, so I'm not going to try. The Michigan guy. If you like what he did last year, then maybe he can play guard. But if you didn't, then Zabel can probably kick in to center and do pretty well for your new quarterback there and Sam Darnold.
Yeah, Zabel is one of my top linemen in terms of this class, both at tackle and on the interior, and he's definitely someone that I project at center. But if you have him at guard, that's perfectly fine. And I think Seattle is not going to be picky about where he plays. No. They just want to make sure that they have a high quality starter there. And I think with 18, it makes sense to do it. Schneider is kind of anti-interior offensive line early, so it's just going to be an interesting situation of if he's willing to do it. But I mean, you look at this roster, and it's very evident that the biggest need is right there. So whether they just stay put and make the pick, whether they trade down and eventually address it, it's going to be interesting. But, I mean, you just have to address the offensive line with this team. And I think even when you have gone out and made these other signings for the team and, you have young pieces like Christian Haynes that you can kind of buy into in a new offensive regime, you're still looking to upgrade there. And I think Gray Zabel is someone that, whether it's at center or at guard, you're getting an upgrade. And I think that's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, but when I think of someone with Zabel and what he adds to kind of the Seahawks offensive line, it allows you to play your best 5, which is, I think, an idea that more teams should kind of look into. So I really like this pick from the Seahawks perspective. Just you can, especially when your best 3 on your tier line, with how bad it was last year, is definitely the pretty clear weakness on their team. You have your tackles that you can believe in, sort of, with Cross and Lucas. Who knows how healthy Lucas can stay, but the interior line is where you have to look to next. I do think this pick is going to be offensive line. Maybe it'll be a tackle if they don't believe in Abe Lucas's health, or maybe kicking him aside. But I definitely think this will be O-line. And Zabel, I think, at this spot in 18 is the best offensive lineman available in terms of what the Seahawks need. So I definitely like this pick from a pure needs and BPA standpoint. Moving on to day 2, the Seahawks are quite a busy team after the DK Metcalf trade. At pick 50, they have Yeah, pick 50. They select Jaden Higgins, wide receiver from Iowa State. They then select Darian Porter, corner from Iowa State. And then they jump to round 3, where pick 82, they select Quinn Ewers, QB from Texas. And then finally, with pick 92, they select Norman Lott, defensive lineman from Tennessee. Alyssa, do you want to walk us through your thoughts there?
Yeah, so Jaden Higgins, I'm a really big fan of his game. I think he's an incredibly fun receiver, and I like that he's gotten a little bit more hype as we've gone along here. I mean, they just lost their big body receiver and DK Metcalf, so let's replace it with another big body, super athletic player in Jaden Higgins. I think that'd be a good fit for Sam Darnold. I think that's a good target. He's a possession guy, but at the same time, he can run by you a little bit too. So I really like Jaden Higgins there to pair up with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp now as well. I think that's a good complementary trio there. Then Darian Porter, I took Higgins' teammate. I think Porter's an extremely good corner. I love his ball skills, but only 1 year of production really at Iowa State. But I just think it's someone that Mike McDonald would really like a lot in that defense. For the round 3 picks, I went with Quinn Ewers, the quarterback from Texas. I've seen a lot of stuff about how John Schneider likes Quinn Ewers, and he's liked Quinn for like multiple years now. I know they've signed Sam Darnold. It's not a super long-term deal, and Quinn is someone that you kind of need to sit and develop anyways. So I can see that maybe being like a future succession plan for them is you keep Darnold for like 2 years or so, let Quinn sit and develop, and then he take over the team. That pick I made largely was just because I've seen that Schneider's been kind of enamored with him for a few years now. And my last pick, Omar Norman Lott, has been the theme for all of my teams. Interior defensive linemen are just getting more and more important for everyone. And if you can rush the passer like Norman Lott can, you're going to be valued. So that's why I took him. Mike McDonald's a great defensive mind. Someone that I think would work really well with is Norman Lott, just getting creative on rushing the passer from the interior standpoint. So that was my Seahawks draft.
Yeah, I really like the positions you attacked here and the players. Jaden Higgins is probably my favorite of kind of those, I would call them the tier 2 wide receivers. I mean, there's not a huge difference between the tier 1 and tier 2 guys, considering most of them are probably going to go on round 2. But he's my favorite after that kind of Burden and Egbuka drop off. He's like when you talk about the next tier, I think he's at the top of the range for me. And then there's a little bit of a gap before you start talking about other guys. So getting him into 50, I think is a pretty good value there. Darian Porter is obviously somebody that the Seahawks need. I don't think they have a ton of outside corners on the roster right now, so that's definitely a good pick. And Ewers as a kind of a developmental, even if he just has backup upside at pick 82, I think that's solid. And Omar Norman Lott can never have too much defensive line help.
No.
Yeah, he's an exciting pass rusher. I think this round 3 is what I most want to talk about because Ewers is someone that I think the draft range is all over the board on. If you can kind of get him healthy, maybe take away the pressure of needing him to start, let him really recover in his body. I think there is some upside there that can be recovered from what his prospect and hype was seen as prior to the season. And yeah, Darnold's definitely there, and I think he is the long-term plan for them. But, it's not set in stone that Sam Darnold's going to continue to create that magic that he created with Minnesota. I think everyone can acknowledge that it was a very fortunate situation for him in an offensive scheme that was very friendly. So maybe if he isn't able to repeat that success, you have someone that is low cost but high upside waiting behind him in the wings, and you can really kind of kick that can and that decision down the road a little bit. But if Quinn Ewers is showing that progress, recovery, and regains that hype and momentum inside the organization, there's a lot of reasons to buy into what he can be in the future. I like Higgins. I like Porter. I think there's a lot of upside here in this day two haul that I think is very intriguing for Seattle, and I think it makes sense for a team that is kind of on the cusp of being that playoff team, and you're trying to really take those next steps. Picks like these, I think, can help you kind of maybe potentially take that next step and maybe get into that conversation of being a contender.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with the 19th pick, Trent is back on the clock with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this is another interesting selection where Tampa Bay, really impressive year, but they are definitely looking to add some more talent to it and maybe continue to improve as a roster, as an organization. Trent, how are they going to do that here at pick number 19?
Yeah, in a draft that doesn't really have consensus past the top 10, I think this is a really easy pick. It's Jahad Campbell, the linebacker of Alabama. Well, Vontae David, like I said, with Trent Williams and Sam Fran, he's 35. He keeps re-signing one-year deals, returning back to Tampa Bay. right now they don't even have anyone to line up next to him, really. I think Jahad Campbell can be his successor and line up next to him now while he's still available and ready to play. I think he can also rush the passer pretty well, and that they need some help on the edge. I think he can do it all for them. I think he's rangy, athletic. He's got good coverage. He's not really an instinctual player, but the athleticism covers that up. And I think it's just an ideal fit for the Buccaneers at 19. I think they have a home run pick here.
Yeah, the only thing that really scares me about the chances of Campbell getting to 19 is it feels so obvious that if anyone else wants Campbell, they could probably just know to get to 18 because that's where you have to jump. But if he's on the board, it feels like they would just run up the pick. Feels like they've already filled out the draft card. They love Campbell from every source we've heard. He fits what Bulls would really want to do. He's someone that can probably rotate around a little bit too. He can operate off the edge, operate at linebacker. I think he's instinctual. He has great closing speed and pursuit ability to where he can kind of learn from Levante David and be a very high-end linebacker. He's an exciting player. I really think that some of the injury concerns are valid, but I mean, when you watch the tape, this is someone that I think has everything you could ask for out of a linebacker prospect. And it's surprising that we aren't seeing more buzz as him being a higher viewed player just because, I mean, we've seen it with some of the other positions that are maybe lower value for positional value. But I mean, when you know a player is going to be good, it seems like in this class, especially, they're getting bumped up. But Campbell seems to be almost just locked in cement here at 19.
Mm.
Yeah, Campbell is somebody who is a perfect fit for the kind of Bulls scheme. Like, I think you can just kind of keep him a linebacker and just, trust that Bulls is going to scheme up some wicked blood stuff with him next to Levante David. And it would be nice to let David have another kind of reliable linebacker duo. I mean, we can even say that we haven't seen this since Devin White, but even Devin White wasn't that reliable of a linebacker next to David, who's a bit more wild. And I think that's might be see a similar usage, honestly, with Campbell, where they just kind of let him loose and let him kind of wreak havoc all over the field. And yeah, I mean, the only thing with Campbell obviously is the shoulder stuff. We've seen some reports that it might cause him to fall, so maybe this is just a pretty optimistic range for him. But I mean, if he falls out around one, he could be a huge steal for somebody. Moving on to the day two picks for the Bucks. At pick 53, they have Azrae Thomas, corner from FSU, and at pick 84, Jalen Royals, wide receiver from Utah State. Trent, do you want to talk about those picks?
Yeah, I'm just on defense again at 53. As for Thomas, the Bucks have been having top 30 visits with almost every cornerback projected day two, and that's including Thomas himself. Obviously, he's local by, it's probably an easy visit, but regardless, they still have it. And he fits the measurables what they draft at CB. He's not the most athletic cornerback. He can get caught up at times against faster guys, but he's strong in press coverage. I think he can be good starter. Probably replace Zion McCollum's the opposite, a very, very athletic player. I have Jalen Royals at 84. I don't think receiver is that obvious as a pick in the third round. I think they could go elsewhere. But they have Mike Evans, they have Chris Godwin, they have Jalen McMillan, and I really don't think they have anyone else. I think Royals right now could be that fourth receiver. And, Mike Evans is on the wrong side of 30. Chris Godwin doesn't really put a healthy season together that often. And I think you want to leave McMillan in the slot. I think Royals can develop. He's still a little bit raw, but he has good size, 6 foot, 205. He ran 4.42. I think you like what you see with him. I think you let him develop. He gets spot start, injury, something happens, four wide receiver sets, put him in. And I think he can be a good pick and turn out well.
Yeah, this is an exciting haul for the Bucks, and I think, especially when you look at just the value of the player itself at each slot, I think they're getting really nice returns. Jalen Royals is someone that we've heard a lot of great stuff about in terms of just how he can win both inside and out. He made some great splash plays all season for Utah State until he went down with injury. If he was able to put together a full season of that continued dominance, we might be talking about him as a late first, early second type guy that's in that mix with like the Burdens and the Igbukas in this wide receiver class. So this is really good value here in the third round. Azariah Thomas was someone that was getting first round discussion, maybe tested a little underwhelming, but I feel like the tape is good enough to where you aren't really too concerned about it. And like you said, he's playing opposite of Zion McCollum if he gets drafted here. Jamel Dean in that secondary as well, to where you can kind of trust him to kind of fill that Carlton Davis role of the physical corner, where you aren't really relying on him to match athleticism on the outside. And I think that makes him a very nice scheme fit there. So it's a really nice haul for Tampa Bay, and I feel like this is a good way to continue to keep the ship right on track of continuing to compete and hopefully win the NFC South for that organization.
Yeah, Royals might seem like a bit of a weird pick for the Bucks, considering they already have like three solid wide receivers. But like you said, there's injury concerns, there's age concerns, and Royals is such a versatile wide receiver. You really put him at any like role in your offense, and you just know he's going to produce and he can fulfill anything you want to. So even though it might be a little bit of an off-brand pick, considering the Bucks needs, I really like Royals as the specific pick at wide receiver.
All right, following the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we now have the Denver Broncos on the clock, and Jack Donovan is back. Denver Broncos, a team that a lot of people weren't expecting to have as good a year as they did. Now they're making the playoffs, looking to build off of that even further, maybe looking to get Bo Nix some extra help. What do you have them doing here with the 20th pick in the draft?
Yeah, so I've got the Broncos taking Trevion Henderson, the running back out of Ohio State. I think this is a very interesting spot they're in. Sean Payton's talked a lot about how they want another weapon on offense. They want this sort of joker kind of player they can do a lot of things with, kind of akin to Taysom Hill back in New Orleans, or Alvin Kamara back in New Orleans. And I think a lot of people kind of saw that as tight end early on. And I do think there's a world where they go and try to get Tyler Warren if he slips a little bit. But I think with them signing Evan Ingram, the tight end spot is pretty comfortable for them now. I like or I like Henderson here to kind of be that sort of Alvin Kamara type player for Sean Payton. He's really good in the receiving game. He's an excellent pass blocker. He's fast. He's explosive. He can create big plays. I think there's a lot you can do with him. And getting this sort of weapon into the hands of someone like Sean Payton is it's trouble for the rest of the league, I think. It's early for sure. I think this is a guy, that most people might not quite have in the first round, but I think he's so well-rounded kind of in what he can do and what he can bring to an offense that it's worth it for Denver. And you've got a young quarterback in Bo Nix who, played above expectations last year, but he's not exactly shouldering the load on offense. So I think the more help you can give him, the better.
Yeah, and I think you look at a guy like Peyton who has always kind of loved having that split backfield opportunity, and I think SMA is still a big part of the Broncos' plan. So a lot of people may be questioning why is Henderson second running back off the board when there's Mario Hampton. And I think it's really kind of up in the air for what the team is searching for out of that backfield contributor. And I think Henderson really fits what the Broncos would be looking for, that splash play ability, the ability to kind of turn a field and really kind of create that efficient running style. You have estimated kind of grind out carries between the tackles, and then you have Henderson as your kind of outside zone back kind of guy that you're looking to get involved in the passing game. Obviously, you could take a guy like Hampton. I don't think anyone would be saying that Hampton's a bad pick for Denver, but I do think that when you look at what their backfield is like, what Peyton has kind of operated on when he's working at his best, it's when he has like the multi-talented running backs that are kind of playing off of one another. And I think that Estime Henderson kind of combination would be very exciting for Denver.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Hampton is probably maybe the better running back if you're just looking at pure likability. But I feel like with the Broncos and what Peyton has traditionally operated out of, that Henderson's probably the better fit for the offense. But we have seen the Broncos kind of go away from what the Saints traditionally ran when Peyton was there. So maybe he continues to evolve and adapt and he looks at somebody like Hampton there, or maybe the Broncos are one of the few teams that I think Schefter mentioned might be looking for a trade up. So that could be a potential option there as they look for a wide receiver maybe to pair with Sutton or something like that. So yeah, this is definitely a very interesting spot where I think the Broncos could go in almost any direction. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I do
Following
think it's one of the more unpredictable picks.
Following up with the Broncos on the day two selections, pick 51, they select Darius Alexander, defensive tackle from Toledo. And in the third round, with pick 85, they select Torrey Horton, wide receiver from Colorado State. Jack, you want to talk us through those picks?
Yeah, so Denver's front seven was really good last year. I think it outperformed expectations a bit. But bringing in another guy like Darius Alexander, I think just gives them some more depth, some more experience on the front. I think having a guy who can kind of play off DJ Jones well and help out against both the run and the pass will continue to benefit them. Another guy who kind of eats up space to allow Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper to get free off the edge and get after the quarterback. And then Torrey Horton, I think they need another weapon out on the outside. I think Horton brings that. He's got the added bonus of playing in Colorado in college, so he's used to elevation already. And I think he's kind of fallen off the radar a bit after he got hurt in 2023, but this is a really experienced player, a really productive player. And I think going to Denver and being sort of a reliable target for Bo Nix is a really nice fit here.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of teams kind of take a defensive tackle on day two, just with how deep the draft is, and even like a team with Denver, which may not have a super obvious need for the defensive tackle, the value is just too good to pass up on somebody like Alexander, who in most drafts would not last a pick 51 as a defensive tackle. So definitely a steal for them there, and the rest of the Horton, yeah, the Broncos, I think, like you said, kind of overperformed their roster, but there still are a couple holes, especially a wide receiver.
And with the 21st overall pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers are on the clock, and the fall is over. Shedeur Sanders is the selection, quarterback out of Colorado. Look, I understand that a lot of people will take the opportunity of a falling quarterback and look at opportunities, just kind of dunk on him because it's like, oh, yeah, actually, this guy's not elite. Yeah, look at his arm. It's only okay. Shedeur Sanders is still a very good quarterback. Like, there are a lot of good traits that he puts on film to where teams can easily buy in. He has the ability. He has the playmaking ability as a passer. He has the instinctual feel. The anticipation as a passer is definitely a legitimate question, but it's a lot of choice routes in this Colorado offense where I think it's a little bit more excusable. In the NFL, I think he's going to continue to find success. He's got very nice touch. I think the arm's a little bit underrated, and I think overall he is he does have a tendency to hold on to the ball a little too long in terms of just like taking on pressure. But at the same time, he's pretty tough when it comes to taking on making throws when he's under duress. And I think that is an underrated aspect for him that should translate well to the pros. And I think in a situation like the Steelers, where Mike Tomlin is so comfortable letting players kind of be themselves, if you have like an ego, you can own that ego and kind of embrace that part of your personality. If you have your like issues, you can air them out and it's not going to be a big deal. Like Mike Tomlin embraces that culture and he makes it work. And I think that is perfect for Shedeur Sanders, who, maybe isn't like the most picture perfect golden boy quarterback. Like he is a little outspoken and he is a little bit like egotistical, but he's like a great QB. So he backs it up. And I think in Pittsburgh, where you need winning football and you've been in dire need of having efficient quarterback play, it makes a ton of sense if he's there at 21 to just rush this pickup and make this happen.
Yeah, this is a dream laying spot for I think both the Steelers and Shedeur. This is a match made in heaven. Steelers obviously trading their second for DK Metcalf, don't really have the ammo maybe to move up, and maybe don't want to give up those future picks, especially since you're just already traded your second, and the roster is a bit thinner than I think as advertised, but you need somebody throwing the balls to DK Metcalf and George Pickens, and there's nobody better at it than this range than Shedeur Sanders. And there's a legitimate concern. I think Sanders is being sandbagged a little bit, where he's just. I don't think coaches are being really honest with their evaluations with him. I think they're a little bit scared of the case where Sanders kind of works out, but the rest of the team doesn't work out, and then Sanders is like, "Hey, I want my dad to be head coach," which sounds like a little ridiculous, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. And when you're a coach, you're thinking about your job. You're not really like, I don't know. I feel like there is some dishonesty around the evaluation of Sanders, and which may seem a fall here to 20. And I think just based on tape, he's probably like worth the top 10 pick. But I understand the concern. If you're a coach, if you're a scout, you just don't want to like risk your career on this guy. So here, with Tomlin, Tomlin's job security is relatively safe. So I really like this pick here, and yeah, there's not much more to say about how good this fit is with the way Tomlin's kind of handled players with outspoken personalities. Moving on to the only other day two pick by the Steelers at pick 83, the Steelers select Damian Martinez, running back. Michael, do you want to talk about that pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Steelers have Jaylen Warren, but overall they have left this running back position wide open. Probably not going to address it at 21, especially with the need at quarterback. If they're absolutely sold on Rodgers coming in, then maybe they kick it off and maybe like trade back from 21 or something and go run. I don't know. We'll see. But in this situation, running back's wide open. And at 83, there's a lot of options on the board, but the one I like most is Damian Martinez. He has a nice physicality. He has some playmaking ability. I think he dropped a lot of weight for the combine. I think he plays heavier. Last summer he weighed in around like 240 pounds. I think he probably plays in that 230, 220 range, but probably just wanted to make sure that his numbers weren't too egregious, playing a little heavier. So he dropped some weight for the combine. he's a powerful back, but he also has the playmaking ability, the splash play ability that I think he can really kind of carry the workload as the grinded out runner while Jalen Warren plays that receiving role that he played last year. And I think it works out well for this offense.
Yeah, this is like just Najee Harris replacement at this point. Like similar, I don't know about the comp, but it's like the style that you do with kind of the bruiser paired with Jalen Warren is another pick here. And yeah, the Steelers are going for it on offense. We've seen how dominant that defense can be. The defense is not the reason why they're losing games, kind of similar to the Bengals, with the opposite of the Bengals. So here you basically spent all three picks, including the second rounder you traded for DK Metcalf, addressing offense, and this is what the Steelers need to do. Their window is really shrinking with Watt, and how many more good years you can get out of Cam Hayward and Minka Fitzpatrick, and then Alex Highsmith's probably going to need a new contract soon. So this is really their opportunity to kind of go for it.
And at pick 22, Sav is back on the board. He's back here with us with the Miami Dolphins, who traded down from 13. Now here at pick number 22, they have some extra picks from their additional trade downs, but we're going to start here at 22. What do you have the Miami Dolphins selecting here?
I have them picking Nick Emenwari. I think I'm higher on Nick Emenwari than almost anyone at this point. But also, this is a predictive mock, and they've met with him and have a huge need at safety. And if it's not him, it's probably one of the offensive linemen, either Connerly, who I think his range is 20 to around 32, or Josh Simmons. But I feel like they'd be better, like they'd probably more not want to look at one of those guys just because those guys are going to end up at tackle. And I think they want to give Patrick Paul a chance first, at least. And I hit O-line pretty hard with them later anyway. So yeah, I picked Nick Emenwari. I love Emenwari. He is an insane athlete at safety. His change of direction laterally is very good. When he turns, it's not the best. He is not super fluid, but he has great. And the thing with him is, for me, he's got great eyes in zone, and that's something that's developed over time. With a lot of these big safety types that are really athletic, like Obi, Taylor Mays, this type of guy, they're stagnant in college. They don't get better over time. Emenwari started out good against the run as a freshman. He had 24 tackles against Georgia his freshman year, but he did nothing in coverage. Last year, he started making plays outside of his range, like actually defending the ball through the air and getting pass breakups. This year, he started trusting his eyes in zone and breaking on the ball and creating turnovers. That is a natural progression of a super young player that has insane athleticism, and I think that is just why he's the top safety in this class, even if he is more of a box safety that isn't super versatile like somebody like Starks or, I mean, this is not a great safety class in my opinion anyway in terms of versatility. You know, Xavier Watts I don't think has a lot of versatility. I don't think Kevin Winston has a lot of versatility. He played free safety in college, but I think he's more of a strong safety in the NFL. So really it's just, I think you want to get Ifeatu Melifonwu and Ashton Davis out of the starting lineup. They're both on 1-year deals. Get a guy in there who's just an elite prospect. And I think that Emenwari actually is.
Yeah, he's an exciting player. And I agree with you that he is kind of closer to the box in some of his best moments, but I think there is versatility in that. I think this is someone that you can plug and play all over a Miami defense that is kind of losing talent by the second, it feels like. Jalen Ramsey's probably out within the next month. We're seeing a lot of other pieces of this defense kind of fall apart. If you can have an instant playmaker like Emenwari, where you can plug him into that linebacker spot, you can bring him up close to the line of scrimmage, maybe rush him off the edge. You can have him handle that split zone. And I agree with you on the development and coverage to where you can kind of see that he's someone that I think is going to make an impact. And even though I think that if I were drafting for Miami, I'd probably go offensive line. We have seen this scheme, the Shanahan tree, just consistently say, we'll figure it out on the offensive line. We don't need to draft it early. Like Miami's probably not going to do it. I'm sorry, Dolphin fans. It's just probably not going to happen. These coaches are too prideful about how well the scheme just makes up for offensive line talent. They're probably going to go defense, probably going to get like an Emenwari here, whether that's at 13 or 22, wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, the only other way I could see them going O-line is if they are actually able to move into the top 10 and get Banks. Because I do think they probably really like Banks, and he can plug in at left guard immediately. And if Patrick Paul doesn't work out, he can move over to left tackle.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on to round two, at pick 41, we have the Dolphins selecting Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama. And then at pick 98, we have Jared Wilson, a center from Georgia. Sav, do you want to talk about those picks?
Yeah, I'll touch on Jared Wilson first. He will not be making it to that pick in real life. That is an insane drop for him. He should be going round two. He's easily the second or first best center on the board this year. After, Zabel is the only other one that I think is even in that range. He's a great zone center. He's super athletic. I think his strength, I think he's already stronger probably than Aaron Brewer is. So that would probably be an immediate upgrade, and that's if he can't just play guard as well, which he might be able to. He's a little on the small side. Booker's the one I want to really touch on, though. You might immediately think Alabama didn't run any outside, like hardly any outside zone. This guy is not a fit for outside zone. I think that's wrong. When you look at what the Niners did, they took Aaron Banks and Laken Tomlinson and stuck them into an outside zone and played with them and went to Super Bowls for years. I think he improved his short shuttle drastically at his pro day. It went from 4.84 to 4.65. That's pretty good. That is no longer a major issue. The 10 split is still an issue. The 1.9, I don't think he's a people mover, but I think moving horizontally, he's actually fine. I think he could survive in an outside zone. He has super long arms, giant hands, and he's really patient and smart with them. So catching guys is fine for him, and like pass protection, and like a team like Miami that's going to throw the ball a lot. And also, he's another guy I don't think is going to. He might make it to round two, and if he does, I could see the Dolphins trading up because honestly, I think Chris Greer is a totally unpredictable GM. I think this was the team that was the hardest to predict out of the four I had.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Thanks for reminding me. The Dolphins actually traded up from 48 to make this pick, traded pick 48 and 116 to 41. And I'm glad you touched on Laken Tomlinson because that was actually my comp for Tyler Booker and the 2-minute drill that we just posted. So it's a really good point that I think it's kind of, I don't want to say it's overblown because it is a legitimate concern when you watch his tape and you watch him pull. It is a little concerning watching him do that stuff. But on like outside zone stuff, I think he's fine. I don't think it's like something I'm terribly worried about. And yeah, this is probably just too good value for the Dolphins to pass up.
Yeah.
Booker is someone who's absolutely should be going in the first round. The guard play across NFL is just getting worse and worse by the year. And something with Booker's pass protection skills is just not going to make it past here, especially when you look at some of the state of the guards of some of the other teams that pick in the back end of the first. I would be shocked to see him fall this far. For Wilson, yeah, I agree with you that he kind of is more the traditional kind of fit that we look for out of these outside zone teams in terms of guard. And I mean, the Dolphins kind of just screwed themselves with their draft last year, honestly. And then they kind of had to approach this from almost like a Lions point of view where we just need to draft good players, just forgetting about positional versatility. So you end up walking away with a draft with two safety and two interior offensive linemen, and you have to be like, this is what we have to do to make sure that we keep Tua safe and that our defense just doesn't implode.
Yeah, they're at the part where you have to draw the entire owl of building a team, where they've somehow blown up their team without completely destroying it, but now it has nothing left. Like there's no trenches and they're just they're hemorrhaging pieces every single season.
And with the 23rd pick, the Green Bay Packers are on the clock. Trent, this is a team that is looking to kind of make that next step. They are very competitive in a very competitive division. What are the Green Bay Packers going to do here at 23 to try to further establish themselves in the NFC?
I'm taking Donovan Ezeraku, the edge rusher from Boston College. It's very obvious Rashawn Gary is not what he once was at Green Bay, and they don't really have anyone next to Rashawn Gary even now. Lucas Van Ness did not pan out for them. Ezeraku had 16 and a half sacks last year, and he wins it in a variety of ways. He could do anything you want him to do. He might struggle as a run defender, but that's okay because his pass rush will make up for it. I'm connecting the dots a little bit. Jeff Haley, the Boston College head coach, his head coach is now the Packers defensive coordinator, so definitely some familiarity there. And I just can't get this play out of my mind. The Packers-Eagles playoff game, Jalen Hurts on his first touchdown pass at 6.75 seconds in the pocket. I mean, nobody on the Packers got close, though. I mean, I know the Eagles have a good offensive line, but if you want to be a top team, if you want to win a Super Bowl, you're probably gonna have to go through the Eagles, especially in the NFC. It just can't happen. They need more. They need more pass rush. I think Ezeraku at the current position at 23 is a great pick. I wouldn't hate a trade up here too. Again, going back to the Eagles, they love their Georgia defensive players, right? Jalen Carter, Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, to name a few. The Packers are right there with them. You know, they drafted Devontae Wyatt, they drafted Eric Stokes, Quay Walker, Javon Bullard last year. Georgia has two great edge rushers. One I drafted, Michael Williams, and then Jelon Walker. I wouldn't hate a trade up here either to get a more impactful player maybe for them. But I think Ezra at 23 is probably good enough.
Yeah, Ezra is an interesting player because I feel like he's been gaining a lot of steam, and it wouldn't shock me if he's someone that we see kind of in that top 15 range. I mean, Atlanta's been a hot spot that we've kind of heard if maybe they don't like Green, they could easily go Ezra there at 15. So that's going to be a player that I think 23 might be his floor. And it's surprising to say that because I feel like just 2 weeks ago, he was probably talked about more as a day two prospect. But the tape's there, the production's there. This is someone that a lot of people love, the speed, the ability to kind of block shed with his nice technique as a pass rusher. He has a lot of moves in his toolbox, and I think that what's interesting about Ezraku is he's a speed rusher, but he's not necessarily like the fastest guy that's just like blazing by. He wins a lot with what he can do in terms of those short area situations where he can take advantage of that limited space to kind of escape the grip of his blocker and get into the backfield. That kind of impact is absolutely necessary if you're going to try to be an impactful defense in the NFL. Jeff Hafley knows all about him. The dots are very obvious there, and it wouldn't shock me at all if Ezraku falls to 23 and the pick is very quickly in because they know exactly what they want.
Yeah, this is like you guys mentioned. The connection with the defensive coordinator is obvious. The fit is obvious. This is a bit anti-Packers in terms of what the current edge rushers they have on the rosters. Usually like some bigger guys, but this kind of gives them a change up. Obviously, the defensive coordinator has changed. It's not the same scheme. It's not going to be the same anything. So this will be this adds something that the Packers don't have. And yeah, like we said, Lucas Van Ness hasn't panned out the way we expected. I was actually looking at like pass rush win rate on PFF randomly one day, and he's like near the bottom. It's like sub 5. I didn't realize he was that bad. So this is definitely a position that I can see them addressing, and the fit is obvious. This is like one of those picks that's like so obvious that it's just not going to happen, unfortunately, for the draft. So I guess this will be the one we get wrong, just because of the way the draft always works out. Moving on to day 2, at pick 54, we have the Packers taking Ariante Ursary, offensive lineman from Minnesota, and then at pick 87, we have them taking Dorian Strong, corner from Virginia Tech. Trent, you want to talk us through those picks?
Yeah, Ursa is kind of similar. I think he's not really what they need right now, but I think he could be down the road. Rasheed Walker, I didn't really like him at Penn State, but he played well. He's played well for the Packers. He's going to be a free agent next year. I think Ursary right now, year one, can provide depth both sides of the tackle, Zach Tom and Rasheed Walker. And could probably just fill in for Rasheed Walker if he walks in free agency next year. I'm not really sure if that's someone they want to bring back. I think the Packers really, I mean, they have needs, but at 54, there's not really much they could do to like upgrade their needs. That's why I think I trade up and make sense for him in the first round. Ursary's got good size. He can protect Jordan Love. He can block for Josh Jacobs. Dorian Strong. Uh, Jair Alexander was supposed to be off the Packers for like 2 years now. I'm not sure what's going on there, but they need a cornerback opposite of him anyways now. They have Nate Hobbs signed in the slot. I think Haley likes his press man corner, and that's what Dorian Strong is. He's not athletic at all. He ran a 4.5 40 time. He's got good ball skills. He can disrupt at the line of scrimmage. He's right now good depth. He can maybe start opposite side Jair, but if Jair walks, that's their guy there.
Yeah, day 2 feels like physicality for Green Bay. I mean, Ursary's just massive with such wheels behind him to where he can kind of steamroll whoever you want. And Dorian Strong is a very scrappy cornerback on the boundary. I really like both these picks here on day 2. It would make a lot of sense for the Packers, who just tend to find good value, get good players. Stenovich working with Ursary, I think it's just one of the scariest things I can think of. He's probably one of the best offensive line developers out there. And getting him, whether it's at left tackle or right tackle, I think that he would be a very impressive player for this team. I don't hate the idea of maybe having Ursary operate at right tackle or Walker at right tackle, and then maybe cutting your your losses with Morgan to where he's not starting. So you have Tom and Jenkins and Banks on the inside. I don't know. I really like this draft, and I feel like these are really nice day 2 picks for the Packers to where they can kind of take those next steps. With the 24th pick, it would be the Minnesota Vikings, but the Philadelphia Eagles are looking to trade up, and they do so. We have it here. We have the Eagles getting the 24th pick, while the Vikings get the 32nd, 96th, and 151st selection. Bailey, you're GMing the Eagles here. What do you have them trading up for?
Yeah, the Eagles are loaded with picks this draft. So sitting at 32, I feel like they see how this board's falling and who's been taking so far. And I have been trading up for Walter Nolan here. I think that if Walter Nolan was kind of taken for their pick, you kind of force something for the Eagles. Maybe you take a tight end. Maybe you take something like an offensive lineman, but I'm not really sold on that. Especially with the players that were likely going to be available at 32. So I tried up here. You give up minimal capital to kind of secure a guy who's just going to be such a menace in your defense. They lost Milton Williams, and then now they just kind of replace him with Walter Nolan, but one of the most just great penetrators in this draft from the defensive line position. Just kind of one of up and watch him go. He is such a controlling player, and I really can't just speak a much. I can't. I just love Walter Nolan as a prospect. I think I have him as probably a top 12 guy in this draft. I think he's just such a dominant player, and I don't know. I feel like the reports are the Eagles aren't really interested in trading up, but I feel like that's likely because Walter Nolan isn't going to fall this far in the draft. So if Walter Nolan does kind of fall in this range, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Eagles be aggressive and get the guy they really need.
Yeah, part of the reason that this mock is so like making mocks this draft cycle is so annoying is because there's so many positions where there's just so much talent and the needs don't necessarily line up to where guys are just slipping. And no matter how you shake it out, it just feels like someone's falling way too far. So in this class, Walter Nolan's still on the board. Kenneth Grant's still on the board. Like, there's just way too many options at the D-line position. And even guys like Darius Alexander are probably way too talented to just be slipping down. But because the class is so overflowing with talent, the options are there. And, if the Eagles have the chance at Walter Nolan, I think it would make a ton of sense. He is extremely dominant as a pass rusher. I think his run defense is underrated. He was slanting a lot. He had some weird leverage issues, but I didn't think it was necessarily like a strength issue. So I think he can be a very good run defender. He has all the traits you're looking for to be a star. I think the potential's there. The upside is worth swinging on. And I don't know if the Eagles get him, it's just terrifying for the rest of the league. But looking at your other pick, because you traded away 96, you only had one other selection in these 3 rounds, and that is pick 64, where you got Mason Taylor, tight end out of LSU, a guy that we've heard some first-round buzz for, so to see him fall all the way to 64, probably a little surprising for a lot of people. But talk about Mason Taylor and what you think his fit is for the Eagles.
Yeah, when you look at the Eagles, not a lot of needs on their roster. Maybe they could do with another strong safety, but that's somebody I think you can kind of address later in the draft. Mason Taylor, the Eagles seem hellbent on just moving on from Dallas Goedert, probably by trade, but maybe he plays this year, then you trade him. But you don't want to be in a position where you don't have a backup option. The Eagles have never operated that way. They always pride themselves on having depth, next man up kind of mentality, going deep at every position. And tight end is the position where it's at the thinnest right now. If maybe trade Goddard in the middle of the draft for like 2025 picks, 2026 picks, you need a replacement for him. And Mason Taylor is somebody who you feel pretty confident stepping in and being a day one starter for the Eagles. Who knows how large his upside is, but when you think of Dallas Goddard's role within the Eagles, I think that's something that plays to Mason Taylor's strengths very well. He can kind of replicate what Goddard adds to that offense, where there's not a lot of pressure on him, and all he has to do is do his job.
Yeah, I think with the rumors of Goddard potentially being on the move soon, it wouldn't shock me if they look for his replacement. Tight end's kind of a position where they maybe need a year of development before they really kind of find their stride. If Mason Taylor's playing behind Goddard for a year, or even if Mason Taylor steps in right away, I think he is someone that can contribute. I think Mason Taylor is a high floor prospect, and that's why we've heard first round buzz, because it's just like kind of hard not to see him being like a pretty solid tight end. I think he's going to be a guy that kind of falls in that bucket of like the Cole Kmets, the Jake Fergusons, where he's good, but at the same time maybe he could take a backseat if you have other star pass catchers in the offense. But if you need him to be that second, third option, he's definitely there and able to produce in that role. So Mason Taylor, I think, is going to be a very good NFL player, long-term veteran, but it wouldn't surprise me at the same time if he maybe isn't like the flashiest guy, but still, no matter where he's picked, I don't think it's ever going to be one that you look at and you're like, wow, this guy's a bust. You just say, oh, yeah, like that's a solid pick. They did good there. With the 25th pick, Sav is back and he is drafting for the Houston Texans now. And at 25, there's some interesting options for a team that trade away Laramie Tunsil. Maybe they could go offensive line. Maybe they feel their offensive line's fine, and that's why they have the confidence to do it. Sav, what do you have this team doing?
I have him taking Josh Connerly from Oregon. And I know you think that they're probably going receiver here. I feel like they also might go receiver here, especially if Matt Golden is actually on the board like he was in this draft, which I also don't think will be the case. Originally I was going to have him take Simmons, but after thinking about it, I feel like the weird character stuff that came out about Simmons could be something that is like a Texans deterrent specifically. And so I took Connerly instead. And I think Connerly can play left guard maybe for a little bit. I don't think it'll last very long because they got Titus Howard there and they're paying him a really ridiculous amount of money for no reason. And then the rest of their line is also just like a box of scraps. So as soon as he's ready to play left tackle, he's just going to play left tackle. And I think they need a left tackle now because I think they really just shot themselves in the foot for no reason by trading Tunsil. If you have a guy as good as Tunsil, you should not trade them.
Yeah, it's a really weird move. And the Texans are very strange heading into draft day for me because they just seem to sign so many veterans where it just feels like they think they have successfully like bandaged a gaping hole on this roster with just a bunch of like 1 year stopgaps that they think are going to do the job. I don't know if they truly think that. If I were running the Texans, I would be saying we need to fix up this O-line. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Something's telling me they're going to go receiver or defensive line here. I do like Connerly, though. I think he's an exciting offensive line guy. Whether he's at tackle or guard, I don't know. I do think there is some dependability on where he lands for what his position will be in the league. But he's an exciting player that has some really good tape and some really good moments against some of the top prospects in this draft where there's easy tape to buy into on what he can be in the league.
I think his pass pro is really good, and that's probably why he'll stay at tackle. I think his run game stuff kind of stinks right now. I think his blocking angles last year were awful. They were better this year, but he still doesn't really generate a lot of push in the run game, and I think that's just something he's going to have to work on.
Yeah, with the Dolphins earlier, we're talking about potential Tyler Booker landing spots, and this seems like a spot for me here. Right now, I think they plan on playing Titus Howard at left guard and like Blake Fisher at right tackle, and then Cam Robinson at left tackle. I don't know if the Texans have like brain fog and forgot what happened last time they tried Titus Howard at guard, but I don't know why they think it's going to go any better. I don't think it's going to be the alignment they end up with, so I could definitely see them going guard here, and then whether that's Booker or they play Connerly at guard, and then next year they kick him out the tackle, or I don't know what the Texans are going to do. They kind of just threw a grenade in their entire offense, and we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll become clearer after the draft, but right now I don't like hate this as just the most logical move they could do out of the hole they dug themselves into. Moving on to round two, at pick 58, they select Trey Harris, a wide receiver from Ole Miss. At pick 79, they draft Jonas Savatnia. Did I pronounce that right?
Savatinaya.
Savatinaya. At pick 89, they select Bayshul Tutton, running back from Virginia Tech. Sam, do you want to talk about those picks?
Sure. I will say first, you got to remember, like we talked about a little earlier, they have Laken Tomlinson now on their team.
That
So
is
if
true.
Titus Howard fails, maybe he'll play left guard in their scheme instead. But yeah, first of all, I took Trey Harris in the second round because I didn't take a receiver in the first round, basically. And the two guys there were Trey Harris and Kyle Williams. I like Trey Harris more as a prospect. That's not why I picked him. It's really just because when Tank Dell comes back, if he can come back and be himself again, you've got him and Christian Kirk on the team, and Braxton Berrios and John Metch. You have all these small receivers already. The fit is going to get weird with another small guy in there, even if he is kind of a faster guy. So I really like the idea of Nico Collins is a zone decimator. He will destroy every zone coverage ever. And now you're going to stick in a guy who just murdered man coverage last year as the number two receiver and who can also kind of beat zone in just like a decent degree, but he's not going to be Nico Collins ever. But as the sidekick to Nico Collins, as just a guy to throw the ball to when Nico Collins is not open or is doubled, I'll take that all day. I love Trey Harris for that role.
Yeah, I'm a huge Trey Harris fan. I mean, I think this is I don't know. I'm willing to say in the right landing spot, I think Trey Harris can end up wide receiver one in this class. I think he has that type of upside. And I love the idea of him and Nico Collins kind of being in the same room because, you like you said, one guy's going to dominate every zone coverage that you go against, and the other's going to dominate every man assignment they have. So it's a very exciting draft that they have here. Tutin's obviously a very fun, fast back that I think can play off of Mixon extremely well. Savati
Yeah, I
Naya
really
turned in way
I,
better
I was
guard tape than
targeting
he did
Tootin
tackle
like
tape.
the whole way I was targeting him. Like I really hope he gets to me because I know the Texans have met with him, and at least I think they have. They met with a couple of running backs. I know running back's going to be something they address, but I would compare him with Travion Henderson and say, I think once he actually gets running downfield, he's better. Travion becomes so upright, and once he gets hit, he generally goes down. Tootin is sort of a chaos player that will just create things on his own or run into guys when he just feels like it. And sometimes it leads to fumbles, which is very bad, but a lot of the time it leads to huge breakaway plays too.
Yeah, I think the hope is that with a little bit more of a pro offense, the fumbles drop down a little bit for Tootin, who was operating a lot with so many looks that were kind of option based. So hopefully
Yeah.
that'll clean some things up. But it's a very exciting draft, and I do like what you did with this Texans team. I will say I'm not sure that I trust it just because we saw CJ Stroud talk about how he was like clamoring for Ricky Pearsall when he had like Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell in his room. So he's probably going to be telling them draft Igbuka or else or something,
Yeah.
and they'll
Yeah.
probably
Igbuka,
just go with
I
it.
think he would be a very interesting fit with Christian Kirk already on the team because I think they're both slot receivers. I know Christian Kirk can't play anywhere else because I've seen it for several years now. But oh yeah, and I guess just to touch on Jonah. Jonah is also here. He's not another guy I don't think is going to fall to the third third round. But at that point, just getting him to play right guard instead of Juice Scruggs, who should probably be playing center, but their best five involves Scruggs at right guard and Patterson at center for some reason because they destroyed their O line. Yeah, just get him in there. Just get another big bodied guard in there and get stuff done.
And the Rams are up with pick number 26, and Wesley is back after a short absence, but he is now here drafting for Les Snead and Sean McVay. 26th pick. This is an interesting Rams team. They added Devontae Adams, traded off Cooper Kupp, or cut Cooper Kupp, I guess. And this was a team that really took the Eagles down to the wire, probably gave them their toughest postseason matchup. A lot of people are optimistic about their future, but they need to nail this draft. What do you have them doing at 26?
I always have a really hard time trying to figure out the Rams just because they go so much to the beat of their own drum and they're very unpredictable. One of those things where they could do anything and you look at it afterwards, and you're like, wow, that really makes sense. I just decided to go with as much value as possible. Jade Barron falling down to the mid 20s is crazy to me. The cornerback out of Texas, I've got him as a top 10 player in this class. They definitely have a need at corner, really along most of their defense. So I think this is a guy that you can plug in immediately and use him all over the formation. I'm one of the ones that think he can play outside corner to a high level. But he can move into the slot, he can move back to safety, and he can do it all in one game while being a ball hawk for you and playing the run game pretty aggressively. I'm a big fan of his, and I think he probably should have gone 10 plus picks earlier.
Yeah, I feel like we see it with these prospects where even like a Devon Witherspoon who started out his career in the slot, he was able to make an impact to the Seattle Seahawks defense. So if Jade Barron is someone that maybe is kicking inside whenever he enters the league, he's still going to be able to make that impact because he's such an instinctual player who hunts out the football and finds ways to make plays. And that type of impact is really hard to pass up on. It's why he's probably going to go earlier than this on draft day. And it's why there's going to be a lot of intrigue for him, despite the draft Nick concern that, oh, he might be a slot corner in the league. Like, I feel like teams are willing to overlook it if you're an impactful player. And Jade Barron definitely is.
Naturally, right after I locked this pick in, I saw the rumors that they might be trading for Jalen Ramsey again, too. So this one could look a little silly in 24 hours. But as of right now, I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah, the Rams are kind of a team who pride themselves, I think, on finding these late round like gems and times in the rough at the defensive back position and turn them into meaningful starters. But I think they know that they're at their best when they have kind of that elite shutdown guy at corner. And I think this might be the draft where they spend the draft capital to take one. Like you said, the Rams kind of are unpredictable, so they could really take any position, and I wouldn't really be raising an eyebrow at it. But eyebrow at it, but in terms of like what makes sense best for the roster, I really do like Barron as somebody who deploy him however you want and just know that he's going to be making plays for your defense. The Rams have always been a very creative defensive team. I think Barron is just another piece for them just to deploy and take them over the top and maybe, get another Super Bowl run out of this core while they still can. Moving on to day two, the Rams traded their second last year in the Braden Fish straight up, so they have 2/3. At pick 90, they took Demetrius Knight, linebacker from South Carolina, and then at pick 101, the comp pick, they took Terrence Ferguson, tight end from Oregon. Wesley, you want to talk about those picks?
Yeah, and two thoughts on the missing second rounder. One, I don't think they regret it at all. Probably pretty happy with that move there, even if it was against some of the trade charts. And two, it's a lot of pressure to take that first rounder and really hit on him this year because you're not picking again for almost 60 picks. So it was a long wait. I got to log out for a little bit and just check back later. But Demetrius Knight, I thought was a good faller. They've definitely got a need at linebacker. I think that they would consider this. They're not afraid of older players, and this guy can come in and produce immediately. He's a very smart player. I think he can pick up the scheme and be deployed however they need him over there, and very physical as well. I think usually they like to bank a little bit more on later round linebackers, kind of like with their defensive back. So I'm probably going against tendency, but the value and the type of player I think fits them really well. And then I was very excited with their comp pick. I'm very surprised he fell. But Terrence Ferguson, tight end out of Oregon, another incredible tester at the combine, which is really important for tight ends as far as their long term success. And I think he is the do it all guy that they've been wanting out of there. They've had Higbee and a couple other kind of Higbee types. And I think Ferguson, maybe not in year one, but soon into his rookie career, is a pretty much a direct upgrade of guy who can be a dynamic blocker with his really good size, probably needs to work on his technique, but definitely the potential is there. And then is a really good downfield and near the line of scrimmage threat as well. I think just the idea of him in the offense is very exciting.
Yeah, this Rams team, with these third round picks, you're probably like best suited just putting in a random name generator and you're going to find some accurate pick there. But they're going to be weird with their picks, but they're going to probably hit really well. Les Snead is one of the best drafters in the league. And if it is Knight and if it is Ferguson, I mean, these are guys that I think can find roles on this team. The Rams, they're a weird team because they are one of the best in the league, but I think there's still some opportunities for young guys to come in and make an impact. And McVay has never really shied away from letting those guys kind of step up and earn those minutes. And that's why they've been so successful in this opportunity when drafting young players. So guys like Knight, who are experienced, maybe older prospects, but still have the athletic upside and physicality that you kind of want in the trenches. He's going to bring that, playing in the box and being a really strong Mike linebacker for this team. And Ferguson, yeah, like you said, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be ready day one to make that impact, but it wouldn't shock me if this is a guy who works with McVay a little bit, gets trusted by Stafford, and by the end of the season, he's kind of taken over that tight end spot for the team. And McVay, again, would not hesitate to let him kind of earn that role and take over entirely. And with the 27th overall pick, I'm GM for the Ravens here. And look, the Ravens love to do the VPA approach, and they don't necessarily care about a little bit of character concerns that hasn't resulted in anything legitimate. They will just take the talent. And at 27, that talent is James Pierce Jr., edge rusher out of Tennessee. This is a guy that has been extremely productive. Maybe not the bendiest guy, but he still just finds way to get into the backfield and create pressures, create sacks, create just nonstop production. As a stand-up rusher in that Baltimore scheme, I think he'd be a great fit. He'd be a dangerous player. And look, James Pierce is one of those guys that everyone is willing to scoff at, but the second that he gets to 27 and the Ravens take him, everyone's like, how do you let this happen? So it just makes too much sense. It falls right in line with what Baltimore's ideology is, and it's why I had to do it here.
Yeah, Baltimore is known as the king of BPA, but I'm not sure the roster is really in a state where they can kind of just maintain that philosophy. They have some pretty serious holes that kind of got exposed in the playoffs after a really good fight with the Bills. So Pierce is definitely somebody that they need. They definitely need some more edge talent. They definitely need some other positions that you hit later in the draft. But this is a good start. Pierce is probably the best out of the options that's available to them here. Maybe they go corner, but I think I like the day two corners more than the day two edges. So I'm fine with this pick with Pierce here. Moving
Yeah, I
on
think
to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I just
Moving on to day two, at pick 59, the Ravens select Elick Aomanor, wide receiver from Stanford, and at pick 91, they select Denzel Burke, corner from Ohio State. Michael, talk me through these picks.
Yeah, so for the Ravens, they brought in DeAndre Hopkins, but overall, I think they're still looking for that third wideout. And, getting that physical guy to play off of Bateman and Flowers, I think it makes a lot of sense to go with Imanor. Very physical, run blocker, gets after it. But also, when you look at him as a pass catcher, he can go up and win those jump balls. He can outmuscle guys at the catch point. He offers that X receiver that you're kind of looking for in this offense. I like Bateman. I like Flowers, but I think getting that physicality, getting that guy that can kind of win in terms of jump ball situations, being the big body wideout, it kind of makes a lot of sense, and it falls in line with a lot of other teams that are kind of similarly structured. You look at like the Lions, who have the Tim Patrick type to play off of their Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. I think the Ravens are kind of similarly structured, where they need that big body physical wideout. And right now, you're kind of hoping that's Hopkins, but after the year he just turned in with the Chiefs, I'm not sure you can really rely on that. And even if you wait a year for Imanor to kind of take on that role full time, it's still a very good pick that's worthwhile here at 59. And still, I think falls somewhat in line with that BPA approach.
Yeah.
Sorry, and then at 91, I have him going Denzel Burke, cornerback out of Ohio State, a guy that maybe didn't have the greatest year, but I think there's still a lot of great traits, great abilities. And he lines up with that Baltimore defensive scheme where you kind of want the aggressive press man type corner on the boundary. He has the size, the speed, the athleticism, was a part of a championship winning defense. And he played a key role in that. Obviously, the tape wasn't as good this year, but there has been tape on Burke where he looks like a first round corner. And I think that he can recover that, especially in a defensive minded scheme like Baltimore, where I feel like they're very good at getting the best out of their defensive players. And I think getting a guy like Burke, where you already have Wiggins, you already have Marlon Humphrey, you can kind of let Burke just kind of sit back and learn and grow into that role. I think it's a really nice swing here in the third round, and I think it could develop well for him.
Yeah, with the AOMR, yeah, like you said, they signed Hawkins kind of fill that physical role, but as we saw with the Hawkins here this year, I'm not sure he's a reliable starter. Probably somebody you're playing like 40, 50 snaps a game, and Eumanor would be somebody who can kind of compete and add that another piece that they don't really have on the wide receiver depth right now. So I really like that pick in terms of the fit. And yeah, Burke is somebody that I feel like people were higher on preseason, and then he kind of didn't have the greatest year, like you said. And this makes sense for the Ravens. They do have a severe lack of depth at their outside corner position. You definitely need some bodies in there to compete for starting snaps because that's an open position right now. Their outside corner too. Maybe they move Humphrey back out there, but he's been doing so well in the nickel that you probably want to find somebody else to kind of line up across from. I'm blanking on his name right now. Nate Wiggins. Yeah, can be to go across Nate Wiggins. And Burke is a good player who fits the profile of what they look for.
Yeah, and they have Awuzie as well, to where you kind of have that veteran presence if you need kind of that day one starter. TJ Tampa is a rookie that they had that I think there's some intrigue in what he can become in that scheme. But yeah, I think if you're taking more swings at that position, they have a lot of draft picks, but you still want to kind of capitalize on the earlier picks. And I think it's worth the swing here in round three, especially after missing out on some of the other cornerbacks. Guys like Amos or Siobhan Revel would make sense in round one, but it's still a question of trying to get the best value. And I think sacrificing the immediate pick of a cornerback for a guy like James Pierce and taking cornerback later makes a lot of sense. With the 28th pick, the Detroit Lions are on the clock, and Dean Bruce is back. Dean, this is going to be an interesting pick because the Lions are another team that heavy championship aspirations all season, kind of fell apart. The wheels were falling off by the time they made it into the playoffs, got ambushed by the Commanders and just completely embarrassed themselves in that divisional round. What can the Lions do with this pick here at 28 to help them make that next step and maybe rewrite fate for next year.
The Lions need to continue building on that edge room. They don't have a second piece next to Aiden Hutchinson that's consistent, and I'm giving them one with Nick Scourton, the edge from Texas A&M. Nick Scourton's kind of been a polarizing prospect for a lot of folks on the first round conversation, whether he's in that first round conversation or not. I have him firmly as a top 15 player, and frankly, I think that his power rushing ability and, just length and strength is something that really Dan Campbell is the type of guy who can use in that defense. I think he's really well polished. I think if they're looking for high floor players who are helping, contend for championship aspirations and they're pairing a guy next to Aiden Hutchinson, you want it to be a guy with that same level of strength, that same level of like explosive hands that just rock a guy backwards and make an offensive tackle stumble. And I think Nick Scourton is that guy. And I also don't think he's an athletic slouch. I mean, he tested a little worse for wear than some of the other guys in the class, but he's also like 15 pounds bigger than a lot of them. If he bulks back up to that 270-pound range, which I think he should do, especially if he's going to play on that Lions defensive front, we're looking at a guy who's going to be in the high 4.7s conversation and playing at like 270. To me, that's as valuable as a guy who's playing at like 245 and running a 4.5. Like it's just a different bag. It's a different type of edge rusher archetype, and I think Scourton's being underrated for that regard. And I think if there's any team that's going to take him in the first round, it's going to be the Lions because they value power, they value grittiness, they value technical pass rush moves, and I think that's the type of guy who brings it in. If not, I mean, you could look if you don't think he's going to be in that first round conversation, I think he could still be a great fit to the Lions at 60 if we ever got there. But I don't think it's likely he gets there, and I think it's likely he ends up with Dan Campbell on that defense. They just seem like perfect matches for each other.
Yeah, you're obviously looking for someone to play off of Hutchinson and maybe add an extra layer of pass rush and pressure to the quarterback and to the ball carrier, whoever it is. And I think Scourton's someone that has that potential. He was a highly productive edge rusher at Purdue, went to Texas A&M, and every source is saying that they kind of made him add the weight that he played with at Texas A&M, and they felt like he kind of lost a little bit of the juice that he had at Purdue. If he's dropping weight and playing a little bit more free, a little bit more loose, I think he can really kind of get back to that same production that made him viewed as probably the top 10 pick, honestly, heading into the season. That's where he was viewed. So this is an exciting pick here at 28, high upside. And I think if you're a team like the Lions, you have the talent to where you can probably make it work if you're getting like mid production out of Scourton. But if he is able to capitalize on that upside, on that potential, and be that like top 10 kind of hype that he was in the summer again, you're getting an absolute steal here at 28.
That's the hope. That's the hope. The hope is he can unlock all that stuff you saw at Purdue.
Yeah, Gordon's somebody I think when you're when a team with the Lions, you kind of do a postmortem of the season and what went wrong. Is obviously that edge two that was the glaring weakness that kind of I think you can kind of pinpoint as the sole reason why they kind of didn't advance as far in the playoffs as they would have liked to. You know, injuries aside was probably reason number one. This was reason number two. And even if Gordon stays at the weight he's at, he's still a great edge too. He does so much dirty work for that Texas A&M line. He opened up so much, just collapsing the pocket to contain, let Hutchinson and the rest of the line's talented defensive front kind of go after the quarterback and just run, defend, and do all the things that don't show up on the box score that coaches love, casual fans don't notice. And I think that Gordon is somebody that may not have edge one upside, but is going to be a very, very good edge two in the league. Moving on to day two, at pick 60, the Lions select Kyle Williams, a wide receiver from Washington State, and at pick 102, Charles Grant, an offensive tackle from William and Mary. Dean, you want to talk us through those picks?
Yeah, I mean, my thought process with the Kyle Williams pick, not only are we pairing Jamison Williams with another Williams, we're sort of building talent in that Detroit Lions receiver room. They returned a lot of their receiving production this year, which I think is making some analysts wary of giving them a wide receiver early. But if you look at that receiving room, it's Amon-Ra, Jamison, who's been frankly inconsistent at the professional level, partially due to suspensions and just not really being in game as much as you'd like. And the rest of them are just sort of a bunch of guys who aren't really people you want playing significant reps for your team. So you want to get a third guy in there who you want on the field all the time. And to me, that's Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams, very good vertical speed, similar to Jamison, not quite the same level of speedster, but a good vertical separator in that regard. If Jameson's not playing, you can put Kyle Williams in and expect sort of some of the same results. If he is playing, you've got two guys who are going to get open using their like great acceleration. They sort of have this similar ability to set gears and sort of push cornerbacks vertically and stack them and make sure, someone's always going to be open on that offense if you bring two guys who can separate that consistently and can play off like cornerbacks sort of their back pedal and, put them in bad positions because Kyle Williams is also a great leaper. I found him to be, someone who can make these acrobatic catches and be trusted with the ball. So I'm excited to have him on the Detroit Lions. I also put Charles Grant down for the Detroit Lions because he's just the kind of offensive tackle that the Detroit Lions love, which is these athletic, lengthy, big, like movers, and sort of similar to how they got Giovanni Manu with a trade up last year. That I mean, you can talk about the value on that all you want, but if they're going to keep taking offensive tackles with the hopes of them becoming sort of like Penei Sewell level talents, I think Charles Grant is the closest they're going to get in that third round. I think he moves incredibly. His agility is great. He tested a little worse than I think a lot of people were expecting, but it's mostly because he was testing with an injury, and I think he still wanted to maintain some good pro day reps. So I think bringing Charles Grant in sort of fits that offensive tackle mold, sort of fits with what the Lions offense is looking for, and maybe he can be an eventual starter for that team, compete with Manu for a future role.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just underrate Kyle Williams right now. And I think on day two, that's where the value kind of lines up in my mind. I think he's got that inside outside versatility. There might be some people who would say, oh, if the Lions are grabbing a receiver, they're going to fill that X role, and it has to be this like 210 plus guy. Sometimes you make exceptions to your rules, and a guy like Kyle Williams is worth doing that for. He's just a great player, and the Lions would be extremely lucky to grab him on day two at 60. And Charles Grant, I agree with you. I think the only thing I might disagree with is I think that I would like him just almost stepping into that right guard role and competing right away, seeing if he can earn that job because Mahogany's good. They can add a veteran, but I really think that Charles Grant has the ability to potentially contribute day one in the trenches, and he moves well. He's very condensed. He's very compact. I think he's going to be a very exciting lineman, and whether that's a tackle or guard, I think it's a really nice value here at 102.
Yeah, I think he definitely could play guard. He's been projected as a guard at some outlets, and while I think he has the ability to play tackle, it wouldn't shock me if he gets some run at guard just because of where they need it.
With the 29th pick, the Washington Commanders are on the clock. Bailey, this is a very exciting team that really outperformed expectations. Was a team that I think a lot of people were kind of saying, oh, they're going to be picking in the top five. Jaden Daniels, a lot of great free agent acquisitions that were maybe undervalued when they initially signed, made this team one of the top five teams, not a top five pick. What are they going to do with 29th pick to kind of capitalize and build on that success?
Sure, if he's told Commanders fans before the season that they would end up taking Starks to be like, oh yeah, that's he probably had a great year and we took him top 10 because he's that good. But taking him at 29 and a non-traded pick, I think would blow their minds. Starks is somebody who I feel like kind of just got knocked down by the draft cycle just because of, we've kind of been hearing him for a while now about how big of a prospect he is, and maybe he didn't have the most impressive year or he didn't pop off as much as people want him to. But I think when you look at what the Commanders need. They lost Jeremy Chin. They definitely need another safety back there. They definitely need some more versatility back there. And we all know how Dan Quinn loves to deploy his safeties in kind of unique ways. And I think Starks is somebody who fits very well into that scheme. There's a lot of other positions the Commanders can look at. Like you said, went on a pretty good run, but I feel like there are a lot of flaws in the roster that are kind of being covered up by either Dan Quinn's brilliance or Jaden Daniels' just ability as a QB. So there's definitely some work to do, but I think Starks is a very high floor player who can immediately slot in a couple different positions in the defense and just be pretty confident that you're going to get some very high quality snaps out of him.
Yeah, I have a take when it comes to safety scouting, and my take is that people are just idiots when it comes to safety because, like, we just build up these prospects in our head as like, they're these like super rangy guys that just never make a mistake, and they fly like 50 yards across the field to make interceptions every snap. And then whenever we see them make like pedestrian plays ever, we just automatically say, oh wow, they don't have the range to be this single high free safety that's just covering sideline to sideline and knocking down every throw. Starks is putting together some really impressive tape. He was playing at strong safety, which I don't think was necessarily his natural spot. I think he's a little bit better suited as a free safety where he's more coverage oriented. But he still turned in like a really good year, and everyone's like, it's just not the highlights that I've seen of Starks where he's like making these 30-yard sprints to pick off these passes at an incredible high point. And so they just like let them fall down the board. You know who else they let fall down the board? Kyle Hamilton. You know who else they let fall down the board? Derwin James. Like, stop doing this with safeties where you just build up this like imaginary superhero and you just say, oh yeah, no play ever gets by them. So now they're just like amazing. And then you watch the tape and you're like, oh wow, they let a play go by them. Now they're bad. Starks is a very good player. And if he gets to Washington, if he gets anywhere in this range, he's going to be helping out a playoff team with very good contributions right away. And I think it's just ridiculous at times. Looking at your day 2 selections, though, just one pick, but you added JT Tuimoloau at pick 61, the edge rusher out of Ohio State. This is an exciting defensive player that I think is a high floor, but also still has some intriguing upside. Go ahead and talk about the pick.
Yeah, he's another guy who I feel like in the preseason people are a little bit higher on. Maybe we're talking about this guy being a first rounder, top 16 pick, but he never really took that step forward that that everybody was looking out of. But this is still like a very complete player. I feel like the Dan Quinn especially is just so good at turning edge players that are kind of maybe overlooked or undervalued into really good starters. But at a certain point, you still do need some young talent to inject in there, some guys with some higher upside who can turn into these double-digit sack guys. And I don't know if JTT can really reach that level, but I do know that he is a very like safe prospect that you can kind of give a lot of snaps to, and you can be pretty happy when he's in the rotation. You can pretty much ask him to do anything. You're confident in him setting an edge. You're confident in him going one-on-ones. You're confident with him in contain. So I feel like this is the type of player that Dan Quinn loves. And double defensive picks for the Commanders here, but that's kind of how the board fell. And obviously you traded your third for Marshall Lattimore last year, so no third. So I think that the hope is after the Deebo Samuel trade that the offense is in a good enough spot where you're not too worried about it.
Yeah, I like JT Tuimoloau. He's a guy that I think just the physicality and the play IQ is something that is hard to kind of ignore when you turn on the Ohio State tape. He was the more steady contributor off the edge compared to Jack Sawyer, who had some decent production, but I think a lot of it kind of came at the tail end of the season. JTT is just super consistent, and he kind of reminds me of like Kyle Van Noy, where you aren't going to like necessarily be blown away by any game, but he's just like consistently making plays, consistently finding ways to the football, and eventually like guys like that just make such an impact. So I don't know. I understand why he's falling to like the later second round, because he's not like as flashy as some of these other edge rushers, and it's so easy to buy into the upside or what they can become. But I feel like JTT is going to be a guy that sticks around in the league and, probably is a lot higher in the like hindsight rankings of this class compared to where he is right now. And with the 30th pick, you might think Buffalo's on the clock, but we got some trades happening. Dean Bruce is on the board. He's here with the Jacksonville Jaguars, ready to make another trade into the first round, hoping to acquire some talent for this Jacksonville Jaguars team under Liam Cohen. Who are they doing, or what are they doing here at 30?
Yeah, we're moving up to 30 to get Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas. The fact he fell this far is frankly draft malpractice to me. And if we need to, do whatever we can to get Trevor, if the goal of the draft is get Trevor to his upside, we need to add another receiver alongside Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, Diami Brown's cool. I liked how Parker Washington showed out at the end of the game. Those guys are wide receiver threes at best. Even if Diami keeps up his sort of playoff push that he got, we're sort of doing the Ingram thing with him, I guess. But we need another guy who is as good as Brian Thomas Jr. to get Trevor Lawrence to that upside. Matthew Golden to me is the best wide receiver in the class. I think he can fill in straight for that Christian Kirk role that Trevor Lawrence always had as a safety blanket. He sort of does that vertical push really well. He's a little faster than Christian Kirk, and I would say even a little bit like I would say they're similar tiers of route runner. So I think you're immediately getting sort of a Christian Kirk type player to fill out that offense. Give Trevor all the tools, all the types of guys he looks for, but also you're just getting a guy with uncapped upside. We're adding great speed to that offense. We're adding a little bit more, consistent catching. I mean, Brian Thomas caught pretty much everything that went his way, but it was a concern I had when I was scouting him lower in the before his draft process. So in case the dropsies come back, I want Golden to be sort of, a guy who Trevor can trust as well. So to me, I think it's just about knowing the philosophy for the Jaguars draft being let's get Trevor to become a franchise top 10 talent who can get us to a playoff push. And I think it comes with adding more offensive talent, and I think it comes with adding a guy like Golden.
Yeah, my hot take this draft cycle is that I don't hate Matthew Golden at pick number 5. I think he's a great fit for Liam Cohen. I think, he's not necessarily the same physicality of Godwin, but I think in terms of versatility, ability to win multitude of ways, that like just nuance in his receiving style, that lines up perfectly with the Godwin role that Liam Cohen just had like a tremendous year with this season in Tampa Bay. So I think if you were to get Matthew Golden in this draft, whether it's at 5 or, maybe trading up into the back half of the first, I think it would be an excellent addition. This is someone that I think is very underrated because the production profile might be a little concerning, but I think when you look on tape, you see a lot of really high end, highly valuable, highly technical stuff that a lot of wide receiver prospects don't enter the league having. That body control and that nuance just in and out of his routes is very exciting. And I think he's going to be a tremendous pro.
Yeah, this is like when to grab Genty and Golden. This is kind of taking the pressure off T-Law. And T-Law's a guy who, even when he was back at Compton, he was asked to do so much. And then he stepped to the Jaguars organization, he was asked to do so much. And at a certain point, you just kind of need him to take a back seat and let some of the players do the work for him. Let him do some easy stuff. Like every throw, every play, every drive, he just seems like he has the weight of the world on his shoulders. He thinks that he has to do everything by himself. So just give him as much offensive talent as possible and see if you can kind of unlock that kind of generational QB1 that we all thought we were seeing at Clemson. And this is the best way forward to do that. This is the ideal way to do it. Just grab as much firepower as possible. So yes, in trading up with the Bills, the Jags gave up pick 36 and 88 for 30 and 177 from the Bills. So the next Jags pick is at 70, where they select Kevin Winston Jr., safety from Penn State. You want to talk about that a bit, Dean?
Yeah, I mean, I've just been sort of a big proponent of the Jags getting a safety for a while now, and I think Kevin Winston Jr. has been kind of an underrated safety prospect. I think Kevin Winston sort of brings this versatility that I think Campanile has talked about in his defense. He's talked about sort of having a positionless defense where a lot of guys can do a lot of things. And to me, Kevin Winston sort of exemplifies the positionless safety where he's a guy who can do a lot of free safety work because of his like really solid speed. He didn't get to show it as much last year because he got hit with a nasty injury, but when he was showing off his earlier tape, he could fly around the field, do some ball hawk style production, get some interceptions, get some turnovers, get some deflections. But he was also a very solid tackler with really good run stopping instincts. And it's sort of the type of thing where you want to see on a defense where they're talking about positionless defense, a guy who can do everything. He doesn't quite have a standout trait or anything like that, which is why he's not going top 50 like some of the other safeties in this class. But to me, Kevin Winston Jr. can do it all. And it's the type of guy you're looking for if you're looking for a team that is emphasizing versatility. You want to see a guy who has the speed, has the agility, has the sort of ability to track down the ball and track the receiver and lay those hits down. And I think Kevin Winston Jr. sort of can play alongside. We signed Eric Murray this year, who's a little bit of a floor guy and, keeping that safety room sort of where it is. Maybe Dewey plays a little, but we want to have competition in that safety room. And I want it to be with Kevin Winston because I think he's a really strong player who didn't get a chance to show off as much as he could on tape last year, but really has the ability to do it all. And I just liked his fit with Campanile, who, with Green Bay sort of dealt with safeties who were, able to do a lot of things and handle a lot of responsibilities. And Winston was able to do that at Penn State, even alongside Jalen Reed. They sort of, picked up each other's slack at times. I mean, Jalen Reed got forced into a role because Winston was missing because Winston did so much stuff.
And at 31, Sav is back with the Kansas City Chiefs. And, this is an interesting spot, unfamiliar territory for Kansas City fans, picking up 31 instead of 32. Talked about it. I think every mock this year, we're like, wow, 31, this is crazy, but it is. We got used to the Chiefs being at 32. Sav, what do you have this team doing so that they can drop back one more spot next year?
I have them picking Josh Simmons first because I think they need a left tackle horribly now. They have been working out every single offensive lineman they can find. And this is the one that I think is easily most likely to fall because he hurt his knee pretty bad last year. He is allegedly going to be ready for this season. I'm not quite sure how that's the case. And I think he fits the Chiefs mold of these kind of more nimble athletic guys that they've been picking lately. Like last year, they took, Kingsley, who is going to be playing left guard now. I had him as a guard to begin with. I thought trying him at tackle was kind of just kind of hurting him, just asking him to be destroyed. But this year, Josh Simmons he's such an odd player for me. He's really only got like 6 or 7 really good games of tape, just mostly just this year. It's fantastic tape. He's so nimble and he's so good at, just getting to his spots to block. But this offense that Ohio State ran, they throw it really fast. So there's not really a lot of time for him to even get beat. But that said, I think his potential is really high. It's just he's a finesse guy and he's a finesse guy that had a knee injury, and now I'm scared of whether he can, whether he's gonna like have the same mobility anymore.
Yeah, none of us are doctors, so it's just like so hard to really project it. But I think all of us are kind of in agreement that, if teams are getting good medicals on this guy, this is someone that we would be fine with seeing like early in this draft. And then, if the medicals are bad, obviously he could slip maybe even into the second round. So this is one of the weirder draft cases that we're going to just kind of have to see what happens on draft day to kind of get more clarity on how teams are viewing him and what his medicals came back as. But his tape is so good. I mean, when he's polling, he's one of the best polling tackles in this class. He has that kind of upside to be like just a franchise left tackle if he is healthy and is able to return 100%. And I mean, if the Chiefs are able to get him here at 31 and get the player that we saw on tape this season, it's an absolute steal.
Yeah.
Yeah, Simmons is someone at this point, I feel like we're kind of splitting their draft range here because if the medical clears out, he's probably going to go a lot higher. The knee is kind of more of a long-term injury concern. Then maybe he'll drop to round 2, maybe he'll drop a little further. But I mean, the Chiefs are a team in the past who have kind of taken shots on players with questionable medicals, and it has worked out quite well for them. So I really like this pick. I don't know how if they can get out of that Jalen Moore contract. I don't know what the conditions of that is, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Simmons, if he's healthy for camp, just instantly outplaying him and like relegating him to the swing tackle role. If the medical's clear and the Chiefs get him, it's just another Chiefs bullshit pick. But as we move on to day 2, sorry, at pick 63, we have the Chiefs selecting Harold Fannin Jr. At pick 66, we have them taking Femi Oladejo, edge from UCLA. And at pick 95, we have them selecting DJ Giddens, running back from Kansas State. Sav, do you want to talk about those picks?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I would love for Jalen Moore to become their starting left tackle for the future because I'm a Western Michigan fan. So that would be great. You can have him at left tackle, and then if Kingsley doesn't do well, you can have Caliendo at left guard and have a 2/5 Western Michigan O-line. But yeah, I took Harold Fannin next. It just felt right. I know they've met with them. It just feels right. Kelsey's getting old. Noah Gray is not going to ever be like a major tight end threat. I don't personally like Jared Wiley, and I think Harold Fannin just fits everything the Chiefs like in a tight end. It's just that feel that they have. They want them to have like a certain feel to them, the ability to just get open, find soft spots, and just do a lot of weird stuff. Like Kelsey is not a particularly good blocker. You're going to replace him with a guy who also is probably not a particularly good blocker after, this last year.
Yeah, I mean, Kelsey's getting older, and I feel like it's kind of evident that the Chiefs were hoping that Wiley would kind of step into his shoes this season, help Kelsey kind of stay fresh for playoffs. And by the end of the season, they were kind of forcing Kelsey back into the rotation, back with heavy targets because they didn't really get that out of Wiley. And Noah Gray is all right, but I feel like he's someone that you're kind of just betting on to get like 25 yards a game. And that's about it. The 2 catches, 3 catches a game, but he's never really going to be that tight end one for you. So getting a guy like Fannin, who, I mean, we've seen him turn in some monster performances, maybe not the athlete that a lot of people were hoping for, but still very productive and a very smart player. And Andy Reid's going to make the most of that. So it'd be a very exciting and I think a very intriguing fit in the NFL.
I would describe him as a good enough athlete. If Cooper Kupp is good enough to dominate with his athleticism, then Harold Fannin is good enough to at least play well with his.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I also think he's like 3 years younger than Jared Wiley is right now. So next, I took Femi Oladejo. he was on my radar for a long time as just a linebacker at Cal, and then he never really turned out to be anything. But then this year he became an edge rusher and actually started doing stuff. And I think he's a really interesting fit for the Chiefs defense in particular. I think Spagnuolo is going to just do demonic stuff with him and just put him all over the place and rush him from anywhere, which will be scary and interesting. He's also really young, which I like in this draft class full of really old players. He's only 21. So he's got a whole future development ahead of him still at edge rusher.
Yeah, I think when you just to go back to fan really quick, when you talk about tight ends and kind of looking to replace Kelsey, I think something that a lot of people are underrating is how hard it is for tight ends to kind of get that many targets a game and stay productive. That is a learned trait. That is not just something that any tight end can do. It's a little bit more difficult than I think people give credit for. So Fan fits in really well there. And just to move to Oldejo, he was somebody who's definitely popping when I was watching UCLA. Probably has some more development to do, but I don't think the Chiefs are going to be rushing to give him any starting snaps anytime soon. And then with DJ Giddens in the third round, I think the Chiefs running back rotation was kind of rough last year. We saw them kind of go between Hunt and Pacheco, and Pacheco came back from the injury, but when they're both on the field together, it's kind of ineffective. You kind of need somebody who can kind of elevate that a little bit, and I like Giddens in that role.
Yeah, I wanted Damian Martinez because I know the Chiefs have met with him and he seems to fit them like a glove. But he wasn't there. The Steelers took him. So I took Giddens, who is, the local Kansas State product. I think he can do a lot of the same stuff. I think he's a really talented player. I'd say he's underrated, but this running back class is just it's so good. I can't, it's too good. There's too many good running backs. You got a whole draft full of them. There's going to be good running backs going undrafted.
Yeah, it's a very exciting class, and this is another team that feels like they get a really nice mock and possibly a really nice haul on the actual draft, and everything's turning up for Kansas City. So, really nice job here, and we appreciate all the work that you did this cycle, Sav. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk through your picks, and great work.
Yeah, thank you.
And with your 32nd pick, after trading down, the Minnesota Vikings are on, and Dean Bruce is representing them. Dean, last pick in the first round, what do you have the Vikings doing?
Yeah, I've got the Vikings taking Trey Amos, cornerback of Ole Miss. Vikings run a lot of man, and I think that's where Amos really shines. And they really haven't solidified that cornerback room despite constant efforts of trying. I mean, their cornerback room has aged out. They've tried to infuse it with young pieces, and you kind of just got to keep swinging because that's been the hole on that Vikings roster for a while. I mean, maybe it's a secondary coach issue at this point, but either way, I think you give it one more go. You give it one more shot with Trey Amos, who is one of the best cornerbacks in the class. Very physical, very like good in press, very good at hand fighting, but not getting so handsy that he draws PI calls. I think Amos sort of brings great speed, great agility, sort of a guy who can follow down the route of a lot of these sort of NFC North pass catchers and isn't afraid to get physical with guys who are going to be, big time threats on the body. I mean, just like Trey Amos, for me, on tape, always showed that he could, get the ball in his hands, get some ball production, get some deflections. He had a nose for it. He was just very instinctual. And it's a kind of guy, if you're dealing with a cornerback room that can't consistently succeed on its own, you want a guy with those instincts already baked into him, knows where the ball is at, and get ready to swat that stuff down. Like you don't want receivers catching the ball in anymore. You got to get Trey Amos because he's gonna just smack that shit to the ground. Like it's over. Like he can generate these interceptions. He can generate these turnovers that could turn tides for the Vikings that they haven't always been winning. They've been experiencing some tough games. I mean, they'll blow some teams out with Darnold, but now that JJ McCarthy's in the fold, now that they've got a new quarterback, worry about that offensive firepower a little. But I think the best key to a good offense is a good defense. I think Trey Amos brings that and sort of eases the pressure on that rookie quarterback to do everything.
Yeah, Flores has always put an emphasis on good cornerback play. Back when he was in Miami, he brought in Byron Jones and Xavier Howard. Even here in Minnesota, he's made some efforts getting Byron Murphy, making a pitch to Stephon Gilmore and getting him in town for a little bit. I think he wants the young guy that he can kind of mold into that star level cornerback, and I think Amos lines up perfectly for what he's looking for in that cornerback position. I think it's a great fit and a great just overall talent here at number 32. I think he's a little bit underrated in terms of just media consensus opinion. It seems like he's viewed as someone that might be like a second round guy. I think that'd be ridiculous. He's a first round talent in my book, and he's going to be a very exciting cornerback. And especially if he lands in Minnesota, that is going to be an absolute excellent pairing. Bailey, what are your thoughts on Amos?
Yeah, Amos is an interesting guy because I feel like you said, he is probably a bit too low on a lot of the media boards. When you talk about the other cornerbacks that are kind of in his range, there's a lot of question marks with him. Past the kind of Jody Barron and the Will Campbells, when you look at that next tier, like everybody besides Amos has a ton of question marks. And I don't think it's ridiculous for a team just to be like, I don't feel comfortable taking anybody else here. I need a solid corner. And the Vikings are a team that have like invested a lot in their cornerback room in the past couple of years or the past few years without, seeing a lot of results. So I think they might take, it's weird to call Amos somebody like a floor player, but a safer pick here than maybe the upside of some of the other guys that slide to round two. So I really like this pick in terms of the mentality of what the Vikings need. And I like this trade down. The Vikings entered the draft with some of the, I think the fewest picks in the entire draft with only four. So trading down here, picking up some extra draft capital is definitely a smart move. Going on to those aforementioned day two picks, at pick 96, the Vikings select Ty Robinson, a defensive tackle out of Nebraska. And at pick 97, so back-to-back picks, the Vikings select Jackson Slater, a guard out of Sacramento State. Do you want to talk about those picks, Dean?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the defensive tackle room for the Vikings, it's Javon Hargrave headlining the room, but Javon Hargrave is 32. So you want to get a guy who's able to develop a little behind him and develop into a top 10 defensive tackle like Hargrave once was in his career. And I think Ty Robinson brings that sort of athletic profile that, can really turn into something crazy for the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, I like his pairing with Brian Flores. He turned Christian Wilkins into sort of a beast while he was at Miami, and I think that Ty Robinson is sort of the type of upside player that the Vikings need to be developing in that defensive tackle room, where they've got currently some, good stopgap players. I think Harrison Phillips is in there right now as well, but they don't really have any young, really great talent yet. And I think Ty Robinson showed off a lot of, quick step, quick explosiveness at Nebraska that could really be utilized later in that Vikings run. If they're going to keep up trying to keep being a consistent contender for that NFC North, they need to reload that room, and I think Ty Robinson is sort of the highest upside guy to reload it with. As for Jackson Slater, that left guard slot with Blake, what's his name, Blake Brendel or something like that, that's just a wide open thing that needs to be filled with someone else. I don't think Brendel's really a threat to a defensive lineman, if I'm being honest. So get a new guy in there. Get a guy like Jackson Slater who may not have been facing a lot of FBS competition, but when he was at FCS level, he was pretty dominant. He was pushing guys around. He was mauling. He was moving really well too. He had some good footwork. So I think Jackson Slater is going to be an exciting potential starter for that offense.
Yeah, I like this draft, and I think it's very exciting. I think maybe it's always a little underwhelming to never have like that second round pick for the Vikings, but overall, I mean, getting a guy like Amos, getting some potential picks in Robinson, Slater on day two, there's some upside here, and I think the Vikings already have a very good team. So any contributors that they can add in this draft is going to just be icing on a very talented cake. So I like what you did here with the Vikings, and thank you again for all the work that you've done this draft cycle.
Happy to help.
And don't go anywhere just yet, because even though we did all 32 picks of the first round, there's one team that traded out of it. Jack Donovan back on the board with the Buffalo Bills. We're talking about his picks at 36. We're talking about his picks at 56. We're talking about his picks at 62 and at 88. He is loaded up on day two selections with this trade back. Jack, you're a Bills fan, so this maybe is ringing exactly true to what you wanted to happen on draft day. Why don't you walk us through your selections? You had Kenneth Grant at 36, Landon Jackson at 56, Andrew Makuba at 62, and Chris Paul Jr. at 88.
Yeah, so honestly, I kind of think we're more of a trade up candidate than a trade down candidate. But with how the board shook out, I thought there were a bunch of guys who kind of fell to 30, and I felt okay trading back a couple spots, picking up a third round pick. And one of those guys that I felt comfortable trading back for was Kenneth Grant, and he fell right into our lap. So that I think is one of the better case scenarios for us. The Bills really need someone who can two gap and eat double teams on the interior defensive line. Something that kind of affected them last year. They gave up a lot of big plays in the running game, and I think that was a big reason why. Daquan Jones did that well in the past, but he's starting to get older, and they don't really have anyone else who can do it at a high level or really any level. So I think Grant coming, he's going to contribute immediately, and obviously he's a really, really athletic player with a lot of upside. I think he's got a lot of developing to do as a pass rusher, but we don't need that to the same extent on the interior. So I think he's got time to kind of develop some polish there, and continue to grow while he's got a really nice floor as just this guy who can really anchor the run defense. And then in the second round later, we took Landon Jackson at 56. This isn't my favorite player, to be honest, but it's a very McDermott-esque edge rusher. He loves these bigger guys who are really lengthy and plus run defenders, and I think Jackson's that to a T. There's a lot to go as a pass rusher as well, kind of similar to Grant, ironically, but I think learning under Gregory Rousseau would be a really nice fit. They're kind of similar body type wise, and Rousseau is also a guy who's taken a lot of strides as a pass rusher here. He was very raw at the beginning, but the last couple of years he's been one of the better pressure getters in the league. And I think Landon Jackson playing across him is something that has a lot of upside as far as getting to the quarterback, which is something we need to improve at. And then at 62, we took Andrew Makuba, the safety out of Texas. This is a pick that's kind of highly debated among the fan base. I think some people think we need safety a lot more than others do. I tend to think we need a free safety, someone who can really cover over the top. And I think Makuba does it at a high level. He kind of was new to that role at Texas this year, but he did it at a really high level. And I think him playing next to Cole Bishop is a really exciting long-term potential pairing, kind of similar to Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde over the last few years for us. So I really like this fit. We've met with him. I think there's some interest. I think this is a pick that could really happen at 62 if he does fall there. And then lastly, at 88, with our pick we acquired from the Jaguars, we have Chris Paul Jr., the linebacker from Ole Miss. I don't necessarily think linebacker is a huge need, but we've met with him a bunch and we did shorten Matt Milano's contract this offseason. So I think maybe there's some indication we might want to replace him or at least get a replacement in the building. So I think Chris Paul is a guy we've looked at a lot, and I think there might be some real interest there as a guy we take and kind of mold for 1 year before having him step in as a starter next year.
Do you want to start, Bailey? Since I spoke last.
Sure. Yeah, Kenneth Grant is somebody I think like some people might be surprised that it fall out of the first round. I think he's been pretty consistently mocked there for a while, but I do think this is something that I definitely could see. He kind of does play that low positional value position at nose tackle, which teams aren't exactly clawing over each other to go pick. So this is something that I don't feel like it's very like super unrealistic, even though it might be shocking to some people. And the problem with these predictive mocks is sometimes we take players that we don't like, even though Landon Jackson, I know is a guy that you're not super high on, Jack, but it is someone that the Bills usually target, is kind of fits their what they look for out of their edge rushers. So that does surprise me, and I really like what you did with the rest of the draft. At all defensive draft, I think the Bills do have stuff kind of figured out on offense, and it is their defense that needs to get them over the hump. I feel like their defense has been good enough in the playoffs, but they needed to be great. And just one game, just one time, they just need it to take over a game. I think this is definitely a draft that can kind of set them up to do that.
Yeah, I'd be pissed if this was the Bills pick, or at least the second round. I mean, I really like Landon Jackson. I think he's someone that is a little bit underrated. I think he has pretty nice bursts. Maybe he's not the twitchiest guy, not necessarily the bendiest off the edge, but I do think he has some really nice short area speed where he can convert and get around those blocking assignments to where he can shed and get into that backfield pretty efficiently. Now it's just kind of evolving off of that, developing those hands and getting the tool set to where he can really kind of take those next strides and convert that into constant pressures and sacks. Kenneth Grant, I mean, me and Bailey are kind of opposite on the spectrum there. I think this is someone that we aren't talking about enough in the first half of the first round. Guys like Chicago who could definitely use that nose tackle position, teams like Dallas who could use that nose tackle. Like, there's just so many teams that I think could use Kenneth Grant, and we saw it with Derek Brown. Like, teams are willing to do it now, where they're saying if this guy can stay on the field on passing situations, it's worth the selection. So I think Kenneth Grant's someone that I just can't see getting to the second round, but I'm only in control of 4 teams, so I only have so much say over what happens here. So that one was stressful, and as a Patriots fan, I hate seeing the Bills get them. But overall, this is a good draft for the Bills, and I do like Makuba a lot. I think he's one of the smartest safeties in this class, one of the best playmakers, and just someone that I think is going to be so good no matter where he lands. We saw Brugler kind of talk about him as a later round prospect, so I'm interested to see where he lands, if he goes in the second round or if he's someone we see maybe slip down the board compared to the consensus opinion. There's a lot of variance in the day 2, day 3 kind of draft range for these guys, but I mean, if they're able to land guys like Makuba, Jackson, Grant, and even Chris Paul, who I think all can make really valuable contributions on day 1, this is a great draft for Buffalo and really helps shore up a defense that is good, but definitely needs to take some of those next steps in order to help the team reach Super Bowl next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing people might be curious is no receiver. I think it's a very board dependent need for the Bills this year. I think there's only a couple sort of archetypes that are kind of a need for the room we have right now. So I think it's something we see kind of in the fourth or fifth round where they take a speedster to kind of stretch the field a little bit. And I think that's how they'll kind of address that if a guy like Matthew Golden doesn't fall to them.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of options in this class, and I think it's something that they could wait on. Guys like Thornton, maybe like as a deep threat that has the size and ability in that day three range. But that's all we have for you on this mock. And look, I mean, we have a couple profiles that we might send out today and tomorrow, but overall, it has been a great cycle. We appreciate all the constant support. We just cannot thank you guys enough for everything that you guys have done for us, and we hope to continue growing on this channel.
Yeah, I know we got maybe a little bit behind on our profiles, but we still, did our best, and we got most of the top guys here. I think we got over 70% of the guys we picked in the draft, which is all you can really ask for. And just what Michael said, thank you guys so much for supporting our channel. We do this. We don't make a ton of money off this. We don't make any money off this. We're mainly just doing it for pleasure, and we're just trying to do this for fun and as a hobby. But we're also trying to grow the channel, try to get more eyeballs on our stuff. And you guys watching the videos is what helps us do it and subscribing. So thank you guys for doing that.
Yeah, we'll try to be a little bit more steady in terms of draft content throughout the year. We need you guys to tune in, though. Sometimes we'll put out some good content and it feels like we get nothing. So stay subscribed, stay commenting, stay liking our videos, and we appreciate all the support. That's Bailey Kumar. I'm Michael Rochman from the other 6 scouts as well. Thank you guys for tuning in, and that's the 2-minute drill.